Hey, people. What's up? We got Oregon Amendment Checker, Manny Pants, New Mexico Citizen, your neighbor, Headbanger, little brother. All right, what's up, people? Today I have our lead anchor here on the Blind Justice channel, and I've played some live. I've shared some lives from other channels, but I have him over here on mine today. And I thought you guys might want to say hi. Hello.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
All right, you got lots of hellos. Let me move this. Okay. Don Hawaii. Aloha.
Hey, Don.
Let's see. News Now, Cop Blocks, Chris, TRNT News, Mark, Manny Pants. We got thumbs up and hellos. A whole bunch of them.
Greetings.
Cool. Oh.
What's up?
Not much. We haven't talked to these people alive in a long time, so
Yeah.
let's do it. This is the long hair is rocking.
Yeah. Growing
Thanks.
it out.
I'm growing it out.
I think people have been asking about what's been going on with the North Carolina situation, and I think I talked with Jeff is here audits briefly. I think I got cut off when I was on his panel a few weeks ago. Internet problems or something.
Yeah.
But Jeff was talking about how dirty and corrupt and backwards North Carolina is. And he had me on the panel, and I was talking to that a little bit before I lost connection. And it I think Jeff said something like, yeah, there's not any big name auditors or people that do the work for freedom and then share it, broadcast it to the internet. In North Carolina, you don't see that many people pairing up with him going around in North Carolina or just doing it on their own in North Carolina, and there's a reason for that. It's so very corrupt. I know it's kind of redundant to say government is corrupt, but North Carolina is like it's a whole other level of corruption. I think I did that interview with Friends in Code. Is broadcasted on the Watchdog Network, Otto's and Eric's channels, and we went through a slideshow that was put together by basically a review board or an auditing body in Massachusetts that audited the Massachusetts state judicial process for getting ADA accommodations for people with mental disabilities in the judicial branch. And if you haven't checked that out, I think it was rebroadcast on the Blind Justice channel. But that was a 2018 review. There's another good study and review from Washington State. They did an audit of themselves and had a lot of similar recommendations and found a lot of similar shortcomings. But they're doing better in Washington State than they are in Massachusetts as far as accommodations and equal access in the courts go. And I forwarded that 70-page study from Washington State, which we can, if you want, put a link to. I don't know if you have it.
I don't.
Okay, I'll make sure I'll make sure she gets it.
Yeah, I think so.
And then she can add it to the show notes later or something. But we sent that to the NCAOC, the North Carolina Administrative Offices of the Courts. Lady by the name of Lori Cole. She's the Disability Access Coordinator at the state level in North Carolina, along with an ADA complaint from Monday, the 24th of January's just debacle of court.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
So if you guys are new here, or you're kind of not familiar with what's been going on with North Carolina and with me in particular, or with us, what we've covered on this channel, we can do a review, and it may take some time to review it all because it's quite insane. I think she titled this show "Suing North Carolina," because we are currently working on a very large lawsuit against the state of North Carolina and some 40-something state actors, including judges, prosecutors, police officers, sheriff's deputies, jailers, nurses in the jail, people at the health department in High Point, North Carolina, like a whole list of state actors that are complicit in the violation of my human rights. And then this is just one of several lawsuits that we're working on for the state of North Carolina, or against the state of North Carolina and some of these actors. This first one is going to primarily be focused on the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, and the violations of the ADA. So the seminal case for the ADA at the Supreme Court level is Tennessee v. Lane.
Fair Shake gave us $5.
Hey, thanks, Fair
Thank
Shake. And so that Tennessee v. Lane case, I think, was in 2004, and that was where a man in Tennessee was wheelchair bound, was forced to go to a court proceeding on the second floor of the courthouse when they didn't have any ramps or elevators to get him into the courtroom. And so they said, well, you have to be in court or we're going to hold you in contempt. So the first time he crawled up, a few flights of stairs to get into the courtroom. And the next time he went to court, back up and down. The next time he went to court, he refused. He said, no, I'm not going to do this. Like, this is humiliating. This is demeaning. This is clear discrimination and a violation of my human rights that are supposed to be protected by the ADA, among other things. And so that case went all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. It's the Tennessee v. Lane case. And the Supreme Court held in that case that, they actually, it's a really interesting case because they lay out how Congress identified a problem with persons with disabilities getting equal access to public services, public access to public goods and public services. And they said that also includes the courts, like that the courts are supposed to be open to the public, right? Court proceedings, courtrooms are supposed to be open. We don't have secret courts. We're not supposed to have secret courts in the United States, right? It's supposed to be open to the public so that people can see what's happening with all branches of government. The judicial branch is an important one because it's this big part of the grinding wheel that grinds people into the system and puts them in the prison industrial complex, right? Where's the accountability? We're finally getting more and more accountability across the country with courts broadcasting their sessions and doing court online, and so that more and more people can tune in and hold the government accountable. North Carolina, that's not so much, right? North Carolina is way behind, right? They don't have to compare, like with Massachusetts and Washington, like I mentioned before, they haven't done an audit. They don't have a procedure. They don't have even basic procedures prescribed for the courts in North Carolina on how to make ADA accommodations and who should process them, how to process them, how to accept them and reject them. If it's rejected, how to inform the person that's asking for accommodation, how to make an appeal, what the appeal process is like. None of that is laid out for North Carolina, and it doesn't assign people. They have administrators, people that are in administrative positions in the different courts throughout the country, the state of North Carolina, that are specifically listed as DACs, Disability Access Coordinators. But those people, as far as we can tell, don't have any training. We've requested their training records on what training they've received, and the response from the NCAOC was there is no responsive records. So they have no training records for them for being a disability access coordinator, for how to get somebody with a disability access to the courts. We've asked for the copies of the training. Like, again, there is no training, so that was a non-responsive records request, and so they just have put these people in these slots in name, just assign this extra position, this extra duty as disability access coordinator, and not train them. They don't have any procedures or policies published for the state, for the courts. It's just a title that they have, and this is sadly very common. It's not just with the public sector; it's with the private sector as well. From our experience of engaging with different companies all across the country, whether it be the airlines or the trains or anything, like, they're required to have a disability access coordinator if the company has 15 employees or more, right? And that's for each location. Each location that has 15 employees or more. What we found is that the companies that they're supposed to have a primary person and a secondary person listed as their disability access coordinator. And they're required to have their policies and procedures for how to do that and to make those readily available to persons upon request. And it's supposed to be published somewhere, not just upon request, but it's supposed to be easily accessible. You should be able to walk in to any public building and find a bulletin board somewhere, find it posted somewhere where they have their Section 504 and their ADA compliance procedures, right, listed. That should have their access coordinators listed by name and their contact information, right? Most places don't do this. Most places are not in compliance with this. And by and large, it's because the ADA has very poor enforcement. Like, the way it's a federal law. It wasn't funded to have enforcement. It's not a criminal statute. It's not a criminal act, according to the federal law, right? So the remedies fall on the person with a disability to sue the people that are discriminating against them in federal court. That's the remedies. Now, there's options to do it before a lawsuit and try to do a complaint, ADA complaints, and file it at the local level and have them try to fix it, and then go up to the next level and then have them try to force the fix to the lower level. And eventually you can file it with the DOJ in DC, and they get thousands and thousands of these and rarely respond to them, because it's not funded, it's not staffed, right? So ultimately it almost always falls down on the person with disability to go after Goliath, right, themselves, and try to take them into federal court.
I have updates.
Okay.
Friends and Code gives $10. He said, "Here, have a Coca-Cola on me, much respect."
Hey, thanks, Friend of the Code.
Trump gave us $5. He said, "Get him, salute, brother." And your neighbor said you are a goat of auditors.
Hey, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it. So then how do you sue under the ADA? Well, it's a federal lawsuit, so it goes to the federal court. And what remedies are available in an ADA lawsuit? Well, all remedies. So there's really good case law on that. So it used to be, and actually used to be out of the Fourth Circuit, which covers North Carolina, that the court said that you couldn't get damages, but that has since changed, and so all remedies are on the table, which means that you can get injunctive relief. You can have the federal courts come in and say, no, you have to stop this immediately. You can enjoin whatever discrimination is ongoing, because the federal court says, no, this is a discriminatory act. You're violating constitutionally protected rights. You must stop, right? So you can get injunctive relief. You can get damages for the discrimination, for the pain and suffering, and for the humiliation and the trauma, right? You can get I think it's called compensatory relief, where you're at the very minimum, you can get your attorney's fees, right? So that, and the injunctive relief also includes, and other forms of relief would be like changing their policy, forcing them to come into compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, forcing them to get to publish practices and procedures, forcing them to get training, forcing them to actually follow the law, right? It's pretty crazy, but you have to take them to civil court to get a federal court judge to order them to follow the law. And then, if they don't, then they get extra fines and things like that from the federal government. So that's the ADA federal lawsuit approach, which we are currently in the works of doing, and it's going to be a massive lawsuit.
Yeah,
and we'll kind of go through the history here in a minute whenever she gives me the go ahead.
Okay, well, we've got Trump said, say another $5 says stay strong. Slow Burner said $10. Try a Pepsi; it's much tastier.
Yeah, okay.
And Dorothy Kirby 1999 gave a super sticker. It says gold. It's
Hey,
a cute little thing running.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it, everybody. So
But,
go ahead.
Yeah, whenever you want to run through the
recap.
If
All
you
right.
guys we got 104 right now. So
all right, if you guys want to recap, and I'll try to keep it short-ish. It's a lot, so it's going to just naturally take a long time to get through all the content. But if you would like a recap of the North Carolina stuff that we're going to, a lot of which will be included in is being drafted as we're talking, like into this ADA lawsuit, give us a 1 if you want me to go down a recap of the North Carolina ADA violations that they've inflicted upon myself and I'm sure do on a regular basis to people with disabilities.
Yeah. Richard Heisey, $20. Go get them.
Thanks, Richard.
We have I see a 1. I see a 1. I see 3 1s.
Yeah. All right.
So we're getting a handful of 1s.
All right, here we go.
Keep up with a lot, so I'm sure it's hard to keep up with what goes on one channel.
Well, here you go. So this is, I met this human being.
Oh, we're going all the way back there.
Well, we don't have to go all the way back, but I met you in North Carolina.
Yes.
She born and raised in North Carolina.
Yeah.
I'm a military brat, so I was born and raised all over the place, and eventually we found each other in North Carolina. And then I went into the military, and she followed me, right? So we moved out of North Carolina. I was all across the country, not across the country, across the world, and she was across the country, different places, hanging out with our babies. Eventually,
growing up.
Yeah, and I think at one point we were stationed in North Carolina at Bragg, and then we moved away somewhere else for the military. And then once I got out, we moved back to North Carolina because all her family was there, and I had a lot of family in the North Carolina area. So the kids were getting older, and they're like, hey, we want to be my aunts and uncles and grandparents. So we decided to move back. And that was in, I don't know, what, 2013, 2014, something like that.
Probably 13.
So we were there for a few years, did some college and stuff like that. And then decided to move out west. Moved out west for a few years and explored the Southwest. We loved the wide open areas in the Southwest, and we moved to the Northwest for a little bit, and started to get actively involved in activism and addressing issues with the local city, like attacking the homeless and things like that.
Yeah.
The kids wanted again to live next to grandparents and aunts and uncles, and so we're like, okay, we can go to North Carolina for a while and hang out there. So that was in 2019. We actually did this epic road trip that she took us on, where she drove us to like parts of Canada and then down the West Coast. You know, the
Highway 1.
Yeah, what is it called? The West Coast Highway? What's it called?
Coastal Highway.
Coastal Highway. Yes, the Coastal Highway.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
And
I highly recommend it.
Took us all the way down, through Cali and Arizona and Texas, and then into Mexico. And she took us from the U.S.-Mexico border all the way down to Belize,
the
right?
Belize border.
And we wanted to like keep going through Belize and do some stuff, but the Belizean government wanted a crazy amount of money just for us to take our car through. And
in order to go through, like fumigate your car.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what that even, like, what are they going to spray in my car?
Yeah. So we didn't do the Belize thing, but we ended up road tripping all the way back through Mexico. We were in Mexico for 6 or 7 months.
It was amazing.
And then,
Pacific Coastal Highway.
Thank you. Yes.
Friends of Codes, as much love and respect, gave another $10. Fair Shake gave another $10. I think they just like me interrupting.
Oh, yeah.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. So,
like, hold on.
So yeah, we had this epic road trip, and we loved Mexico. If you ever get a chance, go to Mexico. It's amazing, and there's way more freedom in Mexico than there is in the United States. These are the places that we've been in the United States, and we've been to most of the United States.
Yeah, we've been. I've driven a lot.
I don't think we've been to Alaska or Hawaii yet, but
but
we've been to. I think
haven't driven that far.
Pretty much all of the continental, like the United States. Anyway, now we're in 2019. At the end of 2019 is when we ended up getting to North Carolina. The last time we moved to North Carolina, and it probably will be the last time we ever moved to North Carolina after that experience. So that's the end of 2019. We were staying with some family, and had been without a home, like house, for at least that 6 or 7 months while we were on this crazy road trip. I think it was longer than that because we were in Canada for a bit. So most of that year we had been without a house. So technically, a homeless veteran and his family in North Carolina. We landed with some family that we stayed with for a few weeks, and maybe more than a few weeks.
No, we stayed more than a few weeks.
Maybe a couple months when we were trying to figure out how to find a house. And one of our relatives is in real estate, and she finds really good deals at the foreclosure lists, and then she improves them and sells them for a profit. So she flips houses like that. And so she told us, like, I said, that sounds interesting. Like, where do you find these foreclosure lists? And she said, well, they're at the courthouse, the county courthouses. And I'm like, okay, can we get access to them online? And she's like, no, they don't publish them online. They only have them like in a book, like in the clerk's office. I'm like, okay. And so I decided to go try to get access. It's a public record, right? To these public records.
And it's not like that in every state. So before you're like, it's not like that. All you have to do is just.
So this is how they were doing it in North Carolina, at least in the counties that we were checking out to find a place to live. Yeah. And so I went to the first one, I think, was the High Point, North Carolina courthouse, downtown High Point, and they wouldn't let me in. There's a video on the channel on that. I think it got like close to 500,000 views or something. And that was where it started. Like it wasn't started with activism in mind. It started with, let me find a house for my family, but because of my visual impairments and my other impairments with the brain injuries and PTSD, like I wear a body camera, especially when I'm out by myself. Like if I'm with some people, I may not be wearing it, but it's readily accessible. It's somewhere nearby, right? Because I've got other people that can be witnesses to anything that's happening. That can get their recording stuff up faster than I can, and so I don't necessarily need to have that body camera if I'm accompanied by people. But so I went to the courthouse trying to get access to foreclosure lists. They stopped me at the door, said, no, you can't come in with these electronics. I said, well, they're assistive devices. And there was actually a cordial conversation with the security, right? And they recognized, okay, yeah, I understand these are your assistive devices that you use to help you navigate and do things and take notes. And so I'm like, okay. And like, but we have this judge's order. It says you can't do this. I'm like, okay, well, I'm pretty sure that order is going to have an exemption to persons with disabilities that are using assistive technology. And it actually does, but they didn't know that because they don't read their own orders, right?
And they didn't have it.
Yeah. But they're just enforcing something that they've never read. They're just order followers. They're doing what they're told by word of mouth rather than actually doing what's right, So they're conformist rather than a moralist. And so that's where it started. That's where the ADA violations began in North Carolina, was with that. And it was, I want to say, December of 2019. Yeah. So I said, okay, well, I need your disability access coordinator. Can you get them? on the phone or get them to come out here and we can work this out. And they said, okay, we don't know what that is. Like they're like,
Well,
we don't.
and they got really confused because if you say ADA in a court setting, they're like, well, yeah, you don't need that. Yeah, you'll probably have to get the ADA to write you a pass. And you're like, no, not the assistant district attorney.
Right.
The Americans with Disabilities Act. That is my pass. Like,
Right.
that is there in place to keep you from supposedly from stomping on the rights of people. But
yeah,
they just
so that's where it began. End of 2019 was with that. I asked for their ADA coordinator, and they didn't know what I was talking about. And that's been the common theme throughout, is that anytime I first engaged with a state actor in North Carolina and I asked for an ADA coordinator, because they are initially violating my human rights protected by the ADA and the 5th and 14th Amendments of the U.S. Constitution, I say, hey, stop what you're doing. Like, this is, what you're doing is discriminatory. Like, you're a violation of the ADA. Get your disability coordinator, and they will help you coordinate. Like, they'll help you understand what you're doing is illegal, right? But every time they're responsive, we don't know what that is, or they just wouldn't respond to it. Wouldn't respond to the ADA coordinator request, right? Just ignore it completely. So that's what they did. They said they didn't know what I was talking about. They did go get the clerk or a clerk to come out and try to give me service in December outside.
Yeah, in North Carolina.
Right. Yeah. So it's cold, and like, here, we'll see if we can give you service outside. And I told them, hey, I'm just trying to get access to this public record. I want to be able to make a copy of it with my devices, so then I can review it later with somebody who can see. Right. And they're like, oh, okay. I'm like, so I mean, if you want to bring it outside and service me out here on the steps like a dog, that's fine. Like, it's discriminatory. Like, but at least I'll get access to the information. We can address the discriminatory issue later. I'm just here for this information. Yeah, okay. And she's like, oh, no, I can't do that. I'm like, okay, so you're refusing me service because of my disability. And like, no, it's because you're electronics, right? And when you acknowledge that they are assistive devices, so it's because my disability, I have devices to help me get access and do navigation and have notes and stuff. Like, that's why you're not letting me in. It's the same as, somebody that's trying to go in with a wheelchair, and they say, okay, you can't come in with that wheelchair, right? Like, if you get out of the wheelchair, you can come in, just like the Tennessee v. Lane case, right? And so that's where it started. I went away, and said, okay, I'm going to follow up with your appropriate channels and do an ADA complaint and figure out who your ADA coordinator is. We did that. We contacted them. They didn't know anything about getting access. So I think I went to a different courthouse because their primary was listed at the other courthouse for the county, which was in Greensboro, which is one city over. So I went to that courthouse and again, try to get access because it's a different city. It's a different set of foreclosures that they have, and try to get access to that information. The security guards, very similar stuff. Like, oh, you can't come in with the electronics, yada, yada. I'm like, okay, I'm here to see, I think her name was Stephanie Wallace or something, was the ADA coordinator. I'm like, I'm here to see this person. I've already called and let them know, like, this is an issue. We need to address it. Is she here? Could she come out and talk? And they actually called her, and she came down, and she's like, hey, I got this form for you to fill out. I'm like, well, I can't fill out forms because I can't see to fill them out. Would you be able to help me do that? And she's like, yeah, okay. But I'm like, what is the form? And it's not an ADA request for accommodation form. It's a specific petition for a permit that they take before a judge, right? For an exception to their electronics policy. That's different than an ADA accommodations request, right? It's a completely different thing, right? So I said, well, I'm not wanting a permit. I'm wanting, you to recognize that you have to give equal access to persons with disabilities. That's the law, So I'm making an ADA request for effective communication, And so she didn't know the language. She has zero training in the ADA. So she's like, okay, well, I got to fill out this form. This is all I have. I'm like, well, if this is all you have, then okay, just so you know, I'm not requesting a permit. Take it down in whatever format you want. This is an ADA request. This is not a request for a permit. You don't permit human rights. Human rights are inalienable, God-given. You're born with them, right? No judge can permit me to have rights. Like, I have them. You just need to back off and respect and honor them. And so she got stuck on the very first thing. It was like, I need your name. And I'm like, okay, no, you don't need my name, because I'm here to get public records.
Right.
Like, I'm here to get public records. And there's the North Carolina General Statute is 132 is a public records law, which says you can go in anonymously and get public records without giving your name, right? So you don't get to identify people just for getting public records, because you can be retaliated against, like many of you know, right? So I told her, like, you don't need my legal name. I'll give you the moniker that most people know me by, Blind Justice. More people around the planet know me by that moniker than by the legal name. So you can put that down, and that will suffice your little check the block bureaucratic red tape thing, where you have to put something in a field because the form says you have to. And she's like, no, this won't work. I'm like, do you know any law that says that you need a legal name for the fill out this form? She's like, no. Okay, so put down whatever name I give you and keep going. And yeah, so it was a difficult thing. She, I think, half-heartedly filled it out, and then eventually they say, hey, yeah, you can have this permit. You can only have some of the devices, not all the devices. And if you use any of your devices anyway, outside of the way that this judge says, then you'll be held in contempt and subject to sanctions and fines and things like that. And so I responded to that with the refusal for cause. Like, hey, again, judges don't permit human rights. Like, that's not how human rights work. Like, I reject this. Like, you're not processing this correctly, like, because you're not trained. Like, you have zero training. So who's your next level up in the process for ADA access? And so I tried reaching out to that person. We found somebody at the state level, and that person said that they didn't really work like a chain of command. They just were another person at the NCAOC, happened to be in Raleigh, who also had no training in the ADA and how to make access equal access for persons with disabilities in the courts. So we had a long conversation with her, and I think I had an ADA advocate at the time. So we had a phone call together and try to help her understand, hey, this is how you guys need to process this. It's an administrative request. It's not a judicial one. Like, judges don't need to be involved. This is administrative, and there's case law on that. Tennessee v. Lane's one of them, right? There's a few others that I have that specifically address this in the federal courts, that it's not an administrative issue. ADA requests for access are administrative. They're not judicials. It's not a judicial issue. For a judge to take it into a judicial setting, they are violating their oath of office. They're abusing their power and authority, because they're basically trying to don the cloak of this horrendous doctrine called absolute immunity, where judges get to be immune from lawsuits, from being personally liable for what they do in their judicial capacity. And the case law on this, as far as the ADA goes, it says no, judges lose that. Like, that's not at play. That's not on the table in ADA situations, because it's administrative, and they should know it's administrative. And if they choose to take something that could have been handled via a phone call or via an email, right, in an administrative setting by an administrative officer, like NCAOC, personnel of the court, like not a judge, right, then they have lost their absolute immunity. And Forrester v. White is their big Supreme Court case for that, where judges can be sued personally and held personally liable when they for issues that are administrative, right? The other case laws on this, where they talk about how to determine whether a judge's function or what a judge is doing is administrative or judicial, like one of the main standards is it during an adjudication of a court case, right? Is it something that only a judge does? If it's something that only a judge does, then it's judicial, right? So you can make an ADA request to any company on the planet, right? You can make an ADA request to any public entity, right? And they have to have personnel that process that request. So that's clearly not just a job a judge does, right? So it's a judge is supposed to oversee the adjudication of a case, meaning they hear from both parties that have to do about arguing about what's going on in a case. That's the adjudication process. And if that's not happening, then it's outside, like,
the duties as a judge.
Well, the judicial capacity of the judge, because the judge can have administrative capacity.
Oh, okay, sure.
Right.
Sure. But that wouldn't be a judge. That would be the person who also wears the title of judge having administrative.
Right.
The judge doesn't have administrative, right?
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
I mean, it's a title. Judge is a title. So judge can have administrative
Susan.
duties. He also can have judicial duties. But
Susan says, keep up the great work, $20. And Union News gave us 10. Thanks for your hospitality. I was out there with Road Nation and others.
hey,
Thanks,
yeah.
guys.
Thanks, guys. All right. So we talked to the person at the state level, try to explain to them, like, this is the process. This is how you need to do this. Like, you guys don't have an actual process. You don't have any training. We found this out, like, she confirmed this. So like, okay, great. So let me help you out because we've studied this. We know what the ADA says. We know how you guys are supposed to do it. And so we're trying to help them do the right thing, help them come in compliance with the law. Right.
Just trying to find a house, people.
Yeah. So she said, okay, yeah, thanks. This has been really informative. Appreciate this. We should be able to clear this up. I'm going to call over to the High Point Disability Access Coordinator and contact them, make sure that they understand how to process the request. So you should be able to get access to the courts and get your records that you're trying to get from the clerk's office. All right, great. Thanks. Sounds good. So she said that. I go back to the High Point courthouse to try to get access to the clerk's office again. And again, the security has not been informed, right? The security, I think they may have a permit, from this judge still that I refused. And they're like, all right, this permit says you can only bring this and you can't bring this. But when you bring this, you can't use it to record anything, any personnel or anything. Like, I'm like, that's what it does. That's what this function of this equipment does. I have to be able to make sure if somebody accosts me or if I trip and hit my head or if I run into obstructions, like, I'm able to document what happened. Right. Because I can't see to tell somebody, hey, this is what happened. That's what the function of the prosthetic eyes do. And so they just fundamentally didn't care and didn't want to care. And I guess the Raleigh person either did tell the local disability access coordinator or she didn't care because she didn't make any attempt to correct the situation. So I was sitting there waiting to talk to them to clear it up. And security was being weird. A dude was like walking around behind me, like jangling his handcuffs. I think you guys remember this. Like, he was
dubbed him creepy.
Yeah, he's a really creepy dude. And
totally creepy dude.
Randomly, like, stops. I hear him like pull out a notebook and like flip through some pages. And then he reads off, the legal name that he's got for me and an old address that we used to live at in North Carolina. One of the previous times we lived in North Carolina. Just random out of the blue. Like, now tell me why he did that. Because he knew that I was using live stream, as part of my assistive device, because you guys have helped me many times in the past, like help me find doors, help me read signs, right? Help me know when there's threats from my left or right. In that case, you're doing that same thing with that nincompoop that was chasing me around, right? And he wanted to try to dox me live on the internet, and it's very much a threat that he was, why would you do that other than to threaten to say, like, I know where you live, even though it was an old address, we didn't live there anymore, right? The whole point with me trying to get in the courthouse was trying to find a place to live. That's on Do Not Disturb, but I don't know why it rang.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
It's because they updated the Do Not Disturb. There's like 4 different versions of Do Not Disturb now, and then you can like set special settings in it. And I don't know.
So where was I?
Creepy.
Yeah.
We got good to see you on YouTube again. $100 from Corruption Report, Justin Pulliam. Thanks, man.
Hey, thanks, Justin. I haven't caught any of your stuff lately. I need to. Did you change your channel? I have to check you out again.
Corruption Report, Justin Pulliam. That's what
Corruption Report. Okay. Yeah, maybe I have to check it out.
I'll write it down.
I don't know, because YouTube always has the weird thing where they stop letting you get access to people that you subscribe to for a long time.
Yeah, they just dump you off their channel for no reason. Yeah, whatever. Can I give a spoiler alert here?
Sure, go ahead.
For Creepy? Okay, just so you know, because we didn't know this at the time, and I didn't even know it on the 4th. But when Mike was attacked at the health department, which is coming up in the story, it was the same guy, Creepy, the creepy guy that was tried to dox us on the live stream. That's the guy.
Yeah.
Okay, go back to
so this was January 31st. I think it is this date now. We're on January, like the end of January was when I went back to the courthouse, right? And some other things that I'd done before that, I've checked out like the DSS office and had security follow me around, threatened to trespass me. They actually had the High Point Police Department come out. And they didn't do anything with trespassing because nobody told me to leave, Sorry. Yeah. So, but with that, I had like the security officer, I think, followed me for several blocks, like from the DSS office, because I'd walked around to a few different city and county buildings and had already gone to the health department, like on the 13th of January, I think. On that day, I did the DSS office. And on that day, at the health department, I know we're bouncing around the timeline a little bit. That one of that same security guards that was like following me around was like, "Hey, you can't be in here with recording and yada yada." Public health department, public lobby, and I was trying to figure out what services they had and how to get access to them. Asked about mental health stuff. I think, I don't know if it was that time or a different time actually, but my first time I asked about some different services. The administrator of the building, Leslie Barbie, was there, and she backed the security guard off and said, "Oh no, he can get access. That's okay." And so I asked the questions, they gave me the answers, and then I left. When I when I went back, it was the 31st. That's right. So the 31st is when I went back to the health department, because it's right next door to the courthouse. This is in January of 2020. That's when, and she didn't know this until like, I think after court, for district court. So way later, when she like looked at these videos again and realized that that same creepy security guard, Boyce, was there in the lobby at the health department, didn't say anything to me. And then there's another security guard that was there from the beginning at the courthouse. He was there in the health department. What's his name? Dougherty. Thank you. And he was the one that was like, "Hey, what can we help with? You need assistance getting stuff?" And he helped. So the second time in the health department, they made an improvement from the first time. The first time, security guards like, "You can't be in here with recording devices," and the administrator's like, "No, it's okay. Like, here's come to this window, and they'll give you service." And they did, and I left.
And said something. Right? I don't know what they said, but they took.
Yeah. So they gave me service. I left the first time. The second time I went, security guard Dougherty was like, "Hey man, you just need to get some service or something." I'm like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Okay, well, come around. There's some chairs. Come around this side." He make sure I found the window. I asked the questions I had about like mental health services and things like that, because the VA was dropping the ball big time. Still is, by the way, on mental health services. But so they said, yeah, they gave me directions to some place nearby, like walking distance. I'm like, okay, cool. I'll go check that out. So I left, right? They didn't say it. So they had improved, right? It was an improvement. But in that time, while I was going to all these different county buildings, I had emailed the county attorney, one of the county attorneys. I think he mainly works for the sheriff's department, but his name's James Secor. And I said, "Hey, just so you know, like I've already uncovered a handful of ADA violations by county staff and county services, and I'm conducting a whistleblower investigation on behalf of the federal government under, it's called the key tam provision of the Federal False Claim Act." So that's the other way that you can approach this anywhere there's ADA violations with public entities, is you can sue them directly, which is what we're working on, filing a big lawsuit with all of this information in it. And the second one is the key tam provision of the Federal False Claim Act. And that one, essentially, you take it to the DOJ, all this evidence, and say, "Hey, we need you to prosecute, you need to sue all these people and force them to come into compliance." And because the Federal False Claim Act it's a criminal offense to lie to the federal government, right? And
even if you're a state
right.
government.
So if you're a state agency, right, or if you're a county manager, and every year they sign something to the federal government saying, "Hey, we're in full compliance with all federal laws," and they do that so they can receive federal funding, federal dollars. And so when they're defrauding the federal government, lying to the federal government about being in compliance with the ADA in order to get federal funding, that's a violation of the Federal False Claim Act. So they're defrauding the federal government. All of those federal dollars can be taken back by the federal government if the allegation is sustained. Like if you can actually take all this proof and take it into a court and prove that they've been violating federal law, right? They can say, all right, and the maximum, this is what's really crazy, the maximum they can take back is they can go back 6 years from like I think the date of filing the key tam provision claim. They go back 6 years and multiply that by 3, every federal dollar. So like it's a lot of money on the table going that route for Uncle Sam to recover from counties or states or cities that are violating the ADA and that receive federal funding. So I put the county on notice of this. I want to say mid-January, 2020. And so through their attorney, right? And he's like, yeah, whatever, we're following the ADA. I'm like, well, I've already uncovered a handful of places where county staff is not. So I mean, your claim is not backed by the evidence. You know, we've got audio and video evidence proving otherwise, and emails and permits from judges and like all kinds of crazy stuff, right? So, so they were on notice that I would be conducting this investigation on behalf of the federal government to show that the county is in gross non-compliance with the ADA, with federal law. And they didn't care. Either he disseminated it and they didn't care, or he's like, yeah, whatever, right? He blew it off. Either way, it's not good because they had prior notice. And so, but the health department actually showed improvement. So I was like, well, maybe they took that notice to heart, right? Maybe it was disseminated. Like, we need to do better. We need to make sure there's equal access. We don't discriminate against persons with disabilities that come in and ask for services, right? Mm-hmm. Because the second time I was at the health department on the, January 31st, 2020, it was much better. Well, I went out and tried to find this mental health place. I found it. Turned out it was a private company, not associated with the county health department. So like, well, that's weird. Maybe I went to the wrong place. I'll have to come back and find out on another date. And it was already getting close to the end of the day. And I stopped at the courthouse, and that's when Creepy was doing his creepy stuff, Boyce. Eventually Dougherty came back and he's like, hey, the ADA coordinator either isn't here or doesn't want to come clarify anything. So here we have this permit. Either you follow what this permit says, or we're going to, have to ask you to leave. And I'm like, okay, well, this permit is incorrect. It's invalidated. Like, I already told them it's, I don't accept it. And we've already talked with somebody at the state level to get this worked out. So who do we need to talk to fix this? They're supposed to already clarify this up. The next person that they had come talk to me was a sheriff's deputy. And she's like, okay, well, you can do what this permit says basically on repeat. They're just on repeat, not hearing what I'm saying, not processing what I'm saying, not getting the disability coordinator. She just repeated it. She's like, and I'm like, okay, well, we're not getting anywhere. And she's like, well, okay, then if you're not going to follow this permit, then we're going to ask you to leave. And if you don't leave, then, you could be arrested for trespass. I'm like, okay, was that second-degree trespass? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, well, under the threat of arrest, I will leave. Right. So I'm clarifying the terms in which I'm leaving, the legal status and the threats and who's making it. I got her name and information. Right. And I think the other person that was nearby. But while I was clarifying that situation, the legal status being the property, same thing.
Same.
While I was clarifying that legal status of being the property, it's important to know what your legal status is with the property, right? Because if this was just a warning that you might be trespassed, or if you're actually if you're actually telling me to, I'm trespassed, I need to clarify which it is. Like, because if I come back the next day that you're open and you arrest me on the spot because I thought you hadn't yet trespassed me, but you thought you did, like that's a big issue that you need to resolve before you leave, right? So while I'm trying to get that clarification with her, Creepy Boyce was standing behind me, like jangling his handcuffs, again, threats and intimidation and coercion. And so she clarified, no, you're not trespassing now. Like, you can leave unless you want to essentially give up your rights protected by the ADA and conform to this crazy judge's permit. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. But I'll leave. So I left. And when I made my way out and away from the area, it was raining. And so I had put a poncho on, and my body camera was obscured and inside my jacket. And I think I had you guys on live
you
at the
were
time.
running a live that cut out right before this happened.
Right. So I made my way to the front of the building, in front of the courthouse, and was walking down this main sidewalk, down this main street in downtown High Point, North Carolina. Car pulls up, and I thought live was going. I was talking to you guys, a car pulls up, and this guy's like, hey, you fucking blind guy, I'm going to shoot you dead. Right. And it sounded very similar to one of the voices that was, in the courthouse security. And I'm like, oh, well, let me angle my phone towards this death threat here so that you guys can get it and memorialize it. Right. That's one of the reasons why I run body camera and everything. So I was trying to get my stuff to work, and he like pulled off. And then so I was talking to you guys, man, that was crazy. Like there's no response. I'm like, oh man. And I checked it, and the live feed had dropped, and she reviewed it, and she's like, yeah, it drops like, you know, at a certain point of the building. And I'm like, oh, that's probably right before he pulled up. So that was kind of coincidental, a weird coincidence, like when that feed dropped. But
because you're outside.
Yeah,
it's not like you walked in a building or under an overpass or whatever. Like you're wide open spaces
so
for downtown.
But I mean, you can get signal jammers and things like that. They exist. Like whether this guy was running a signal jammer, or whether it was just like a really opportune time that it dropped. I don't know. So he issued a death threat. So he was going to shoot me dead. He peeled off and rounded the corner and drove off before I got my stuff back up and running. The next day, so that was a Friday, January 31st. The next day, I went to the High Point Police Department to report this. Like, hey, you know, just so you guys know, you can probably pull that security camera footage from the courthouse. Here's the time, the exact time that it happened, because we were live. We know exactly when, you know, within minutes of when this death threat happened. You should be able to see me walking on the sidewalk. You should be able to see the car that pulled up next to me, and you guys should be able to, you know, at least get that license plate number. And so if I do show up dead, then you have a prime suspect, because a guy, you know, you threatened to kill me. I think we have some audio of it from the body camera.
Yeah, I can link up the body camera to the where you had the live stream, and it cuts like because the body camera is still, it's muffled audio, but I can hear it
because it's like in my coat, in my poncho.
But it's right there.
But yeah, you can hear the death threat.
You can hear the death threat, and you can hear that you're like, guys, you're still there.
Right.
Like what?
Yeah. So I reported that to the High Point Police Department the next day, and they're like, okay, well, we have, you know, they just gave me an incident report number basically. And I told them like, hey, this is, you know, there's going to be security cameras footage. There's probably traffic cams, because they have traffic cams downtown High Point, that you can actually find, at least identify the vehicle, right? And I said it sounded like a familiar voice, like it was one of the security guards. And then you can actually identify that vehicle, see, okay, does it park at the courthouse? And if it does, then you've got a pretty good lead on, you know, who made this death threat, right? And you can go at least do some investigation into that. Well, they didn't do any of that, right? So that was Friday. I'm sorry, the death threat was on Friday, January 31st, 2020. Reported it on the 1st of February. So this is like 2 years ago now, of 2020, on Saturday. And then I think Sunday would be the 3rd. On Monday, I went back again, trying to get access to figure out what was going on with the health department, mental health services, because I went to a place that was a private company. And so I said, hey, I wanted to make sure that I went to the right place, whether they do or do not have services for mental health for the county health department. And that was like the main reason, you know, I was there. The secondary, like tertiary reasons, of course, were the ongoing investigation to ADA compliance. They made improvements from the first time to the second time. So I had no expectations that they would like go tank. And they would tank. they would continue, right?
Yeah, it seemed to be improving. It seemed like it was chill.
Yeah,
it's like whatever.
So
just go ask a question.
Yes, exactly. Go get this information and move on. And because that's what I had done previously. As soon as they gave me the service that I was there for, I left. Both times I was there.
And you went toward the end of the day because it was going to be an in and out.
Yeah.
No big deal.
So it was like around 4:30 or something on Monday. And
2 years, 2 days ago.
Yeah. So that was February 4th, 2020. Went in, and if you haven't seen that video, it's posted. It's probably, I think it's been viewed millions of times between all the channels that have covered it. It's where the security guards, you know, beat me down, like slam my head against the floor, strike me, choke me, rip my devices off my body, out of my hand, my cane out of my hand.
Yeah.
You know, they give me another brain injury. And the main attacker was the security guard that we dubbed Creepy, Alfonso Boyce. And he did not identify himself as a police officer before attacking me and throwing me to the ground and all this stuff. And again, this is because the administrator came out, again, Leslie Barbie, and she's like, you need to turn off your devices. And I'm like, well, these are assistive devices. Where's your ADA coordinator? She refused to get her ADA coordinator. The security guard's like, well, he reiterated, well, if you don't turn off your devices, we're going to ask you to leave.
Your assistive device, not your assistive devices, your recording devices.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, well, then clearly there's a misunderstanding
Right.
here.
So
because
let me
these are
me
all-
address the if part of the statement, then part of the statement. The if part is these recording devices are my assistive devices. They are protected. Like they're helping me because of my disabilities. Like you can't tell me to turn these off no more than you can tell the wheelchair person to get out of the wheelchair, right? Or the hearing impaired person to turn off his hearing aid. And so we need to address that and clarify that if you have a disability coordinator, that's going to help you understand that. But they weren't interested in that. They were just already hyped up. They'd already been being told by other people to do certain things. Right. And
yeah, Boyce came in with his gloves on, putting his gloves on within like 3 seconds of coming in that room, which we didn't realize. I didn't realize this till later because I watched it live with you guys.
So then it just kept going crazy. And Boyce was like, all right, trying to get them to tell me to leave, like straight up tell me to leave. But then it never came out that way. They never told me to leave. It was always an ultimatum. If you don't turn off your devices, then we'll ask you to leave. I'm like, okay, we still need to address this part. Like you can't tell somebody to leave because they're trying to get equal access with their assistive devices, like because of their disability. That's just clear discrimination, right? And then it went to shit. He grabbed me, threw me to the ground. He said something like, well, he said, yeah, if you don't leave, I'm going to arrest you for trespass. And I asked him to, would it be second-degree trespass? Again, the same thing as before that he had witnessed with me and the deputy, where I was like, what's my legal status with this property? Am I being trespassed now? Or are you just saying, if I don't leave, I will be trespassed? I want to know if I can come back and get service. And he was like, it's whatever you want it to be. So he was off. I had no clarification. Wasn't interested in clarifying. He wanted to hurt me, which we had evidence that he wanted to hurt me because before, just 3 days before on Friday, he was the one following me around, one reading off my name and an old address, doing those threats. And then I got a death threat. I don't know if it was him or if it was one of his colleagues, but I got a death threat from somebody that worked there just a few days before. And then, so he'd already been wanting to hurt me. He'd already had malice and wanted to physically harm me. Right. And, I didn't put this together until afterwards, right? Until we reviewed all this stuff and like, oh man, he was here, he was here, like, and how his like demeanor just continued to escalate,
I didn't realize at all.
Yeah. So, but this is the same guy, Alfonso Boyce. He worked for North State Company Police. So that's the thing. Like he's North State Company Police is like it's a private police company. They get their guys that are security guards, police trained at police academies, so they have arrest powers. So essentially, when somebody wants to hire a security guard, they can hire just a regular security guard that doesn't have arrest powers, law enforcement stuff, can carry a gun and things, or they can hire somebody with arrest powers and can actually not have to call the police because they are also police. They can arrest you on the spot and do whatever, right?
Johnny says mercenaries.
Yeah, mercenaries. Yeah. So that's what this guy was, right? But nobody told me he was police. In fact, the administrator said that these are all our security. So some guy saying that I'll be arrested for trespass. To me, like if it's a security guard saying that, he's like, we're gonna call the police and you're gonna have to deal with the police about being trespassed. Okay, there's still time for us to work this out. There's still time for us to have an understanding of what's going on. Let's clarify the situation, and that's what I was trying to do. And then he goes just apeshit, grabs me, throws me to the ground, picks me up, slams my head, right, chokes me a few times, and
nuts.
Eventually they get me in a wheelchair, take me out, take me to the courthouse, and then we didn't know that he had body camera until we went to district court for this case because they charged me with second-degree trespass and resisting a public officer. And again, he didn't say he was a cop until I asked him like 9 times, and I was already on the ground. And
who are you?
Yeah, and then he eventually said he was with North State Company Police. So the body camera, the audio, I don't know what the video shows because they didn't provide a visual interpreter, but the audio is very telling because we actually got the audio of that district court trial, quote fingers trial, because it was a not a miscarriage of justice. A miscarriage is like accidental. It was an abortion of justice. It was very intentional. The quote judge in that is Michelle Fletcher, and she issued a permit. When I asked for access to the courts for that, she issued a permit.
And I always wait till like the last minute to
and it was like the last day or day or two before. But the permit wasn't in an accessible format, so I couldn't even read it. And it denied, most of my requests, and it said that I could bring in a couple of things, but I couldn't use them anyway other than what she deemed appropriate. And she has no training or expertise on how people with visual impairments use these devices.
And she didn't bother asking you.
And she didn't ask me, right? So I refused her permit. So no, you don't permit rights. They're inalienable. They're God-given. Like, no, right? We're jumping way ahead because the district court trial happened way later in 2021. But because
we found out about
because part of the story, we found out about this body camera footage that Alfonso Boyce had. So over a year later, we find out that he has this body camera footage, and the audio from it, this is never, we didn't know this existed until afterwards, and we have it now.
As a personal camera too.
Because one of the quote accommodations she made was to provide audio of the court reporter's recording of the trial.
Audio recording.
Yeah. And they normally don't do that in district court. They normally don't have court reporters, right? But she made a point of it every time we started court to say, hey, we're making this audio recording. We're on the record as an accommodation for the blind man, right? So let's spotlight the person with a disability at the start of every session, right? And then there's a struggle for me actually getting that audio afterwards. They wanted me to fill out different special forms and things like that. I'm like, no. She said this was going to be provided to me at no charge as an accommodation. Like this was an accommodation agreement that was already made. And they never actually gave it to me. They gave it to the attorney I had, who I subsequently fired. And I got it from him. So the body camera audio, after they wheeled me into the courthouse, has a section of, like, the last thing that you hear me saying is, somebody get me some help. And then you hear creepy Alfonso Boyce that worked for North State Company Police, his body camera, right? Hear him saying, hey, watch out, watch his head. And then you hear a thud, and you hear me like mumbling in my head.
Garbled. You get some garbled speech. My head. And
then that's it. Like there's no more audio from Mike after that. So we still don't have a clear picture of the timeline, but we do know that they had me in the magistrate's office for a certain amount of period. They had me in a wheelchair. They had me handcuffed for who knows how long. I still have nerve damage to both wrists, which, somebody that is a cane user, I drop my cane, frequently, which I hadn't done before that. So it's still an ongoing impact in our life. And they booked me into the jail. At some point, they pulled me out of the jail because you guys were like calling like crazy and trying to get them to, do the right thing. And then I guess the magistrate just was freaked out because of all the phone calls, and everybody knew what was going on and saw it happen live. He told them to release me, and they dumped me outside the jail or magistrate's office somewhere unconscious, right? So I'm pretty sure that little thud that we hear on the body camera is where was the last blow to my head that knocked me out. And then the next thing when I come to, it's like some 5 hours later in the emergency room, like around 11 p.m. But their records say that they released me around 7 p.m. and the EMTs picked me up sometime after 8 p.m. So they had dumped me outside unconscious, and the EMTs take me to the hospital. They find a brain injury, bleeding in the brain, the abrasions, like all kinds of stuff on my chest that they were doing. And that's probably from like a sternal rub is what you would do to try to get somebody to wake up if they're unresponsive. And then the damage to my wrists and things like that. So, so that was February 4th, 2020 was when that attack happened.
And yeah, it's on YouTube. We have the live stream, and then we have the security camera footage that we got that I synced up with the live stream, which fast forwarding, they finally gave it to us. And what they gave me was this slowed down, weird like there's all kinds of cuts in it, and it's missing a bunch of different footage. But they slowed it down to make it look like it's as long as the GoPro footage and the live stream. So it's really strange. It was really hard to.
It's highly
work with.
edited, and
Yeah.
I don't know what version of the security camera footage they played at the district court, because they didn't provide a visual interpreter. So if it's the same version that they gave us, then they played highly edited video as
Right.
evidence.
Right.
You know, so if you show somebody slowly pushing somebody, it doesn't look as traumatic as they're like, you know, doing it full speed.
Right.
Yeah. So that was the first kidnapping arrest, you know, in North Carolina, February 4th, 2020. And then, you know, she'd actually found a house in Madison, North Carolina.
Not a foreclosure.
Yeah. Because we never got the list.
We moved on.
Yeah. And we had just moved in like shortly after this. And
busy month.
Yeah. One of our first nights in town in Madison, North Carolina was the 21st, like, you know, 2 weeks later. And of February 21st, 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the parking lot, the church parking lot. You know, she's playing Pokemon Go. There's like a bunch of Pokemon stops downtown, and you know, we were out just talking, you know, as a couple. And she saw a car pull up behind her. She thought it was another Pokemon player. You know, it's very common. And then she was already done, so she started to leave. Blue lights came on. She stops immediately, and then the crazy dude pops out, and Keith Benfield. He's like, "Give me your IDs." And we're like, "Okay, who are you? Why do you want the IDs? What's the reason for the stop?" He didn't tell us the reason. He told us who he was, but he, you know, it's just insane. He immediately started to threaten to smash our window. He's like, "I need your IDs. You know, you're gonna lose this window." And the window is cracked. But again, it's like end of February. It's like in the 30s.
It's cold.
Yeah, it's cold out. And yeah, he threatens him like 20, 25 times to smash your window. He has no RES, right?
Yep.
And so we're like, we kept asking, "What is your RES? What's your RES? Why do you stop?" And because he kept going psycho and threatening, she showed her ID, and he wanted to hold it. So she slips it up to the crack, and he grabs it. He's demanding mine. And he's like, he doesn't have an ID. He's blind. He doesn't have a driver's license, man.
And he's a passenger.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
What's your problem?
Yeah. So
go run mine.
But the crazy thing is, like, he already ran the license plate. You can hear it on the radio. He ran the license plate. License plate it's a DV, right? It's a disabled veteran plate. Mm-hmm. So it starts with DV, and then it actually says it like in words, disabled veteran.
Yeah.
Right. There's like a disabled placard in the window. She tells him, "I'm a blind guy." Mm-hmm. Right. The car is registered in both of our names, both of our legal names, because in order to get the disabled veteran plate, it has to be in the disabled veteran's name, even though I can't drive it. It's really weird. But yeah. So he had my name, right? He had both of our names by running the plate, you know? Yeah. So it was just this weird, crazy power trip ego thing. Super scary situation that, you know, because he was just unhinged right off the bat.
Yeah.
You know?
I remember asking, like, can I talk to anyone else other than you? Can you like back away and let anyone else come and talk to us?
Asked for a supervisor. He denied that. So then we called the sheriff's office. It's like, "Hey man, we don't know if this guy's actually a cop. Like, he's not acting like a cop. He's acting like a crazy person." And they're like, "Well, just do what he says."
Mm-hmm. Well, so, he's probably upset.
Yeah.
You're not doing what he says.
So eventually, you know, she rolls the window down, but she says, "You know, I'm afraid of you. I'm afraid if I roll the window down, you're going to rip me out." He's like, "No, if you roll the window down, I won't." And as soon as she rolls it down, that's what he does. He opens it up, rips her out of the car.
1 second, he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. Next second is, well, you're about to be real afraid because you're about to lose this window. And like, whatever, dude. Yeah. So
completely unstable individual. Keith Benfield still works in the Madison Police Department in Madison, North Carolina.
Yeah. Super dangerous, dude.
Yeah.
Comply or die. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
exactly.
Anyway, they get her out, right? He hands her off to some guys from a different town. So there's 2 guys from Mayodan and then 2 guys from Madison. Keith Benfield and Matthew Michael are the 2 Madison guys. Benfield comes back to the car, climbs in the driver's seat. He's climbing through the car. And you can't see this on the video because the guy, Matthew Michael, on my side had already taken my phone and thrown it on the dashboard. Right? Taking it out of my hand.
There's no reason for that.
And but you can hear the audio of me saying, "Hey man, we don't consent to searches and seizures, like get out of my van." And he goes, "Well, if you're blind, how do you know I'm in your van?" And it's such an ignorant statement, right? But you could feel people climbing in and out of your car if you're sitting in the car, right? You don't have to be
shakes the car.
You don't have to be able to see them, but you can smell them. I can hear them. I can feel you. Like there's other senses, man. You know, and so yeah, you can hear that on the audio of that encounter, right? It's important because we'll come back to that. They get me out. I tell them I got all these disabilities. I ask for a disability coordinator. They don't respond. They don't know what I'm talking about. They put me in handcuffs behind my back, and I say, "Hey, don't do that. I'm blind. If I fall, I can't see what's in front of me. It's more likely that I'm going to trip, and if I fall, I can't catch myself. I'm going to smash my face." And they didn't care, so they still kept me in cuffs behind my back in 30-degree weather. And the guy's like, I need to run you for warrants. Like he kept saying, I need to run you for warrants. And then he eventually would throw out, well, it's trespassing. I'm like, no, dude, we were leaving. This is a public parking lot. Like there's no way this trespassing, right? There's nothing posted saying no trespassing. Nobody's told us to leave. Even if they did, we were leaving. Like, so he was just fishing. He was just trying to run us for warrants. That was the scope of his stop, in which, cops can't just stop people and run them for warrants. Like it's not what the Fourth Amendment allows in the United States, right? So eventually he had enough, and he takes me to a car, and they search me. And then as they're throwing me in the car, they say, "You're under arrest." I'm like, "Okay." And he said, they take me instead of to the magistrate, which they're supposed to take you straight to a magistrate. Instead of taking me to the magistrate's office, they take me to the police department, which is like a few blocks away. And we're at the police department for an hour. And we got this from the CAD report, right? Mm-hmm. It had the timeline and everything. At the police station, Matthew Michael, the other officer, admits that, they recognized me from YouTube, from the activism, and that their captain, Jason White, had been tracking me, like with what I was doing in Guilford County, like to expose the corruption of the Guilford County officials, mm-hmm. Right? But remember in the Guilford County, when we just talked about with the High Point thing, the health department, they didn't get an ID for me because I was unconscious. Like I couldn't ID. I don't carry an ID. I don't have an ID, right? So I couldn't verbalize any identification to them. So these small town country cops, were like, "Oh, we got to get this ID and show these big city cops how it's done. How we do it, right?" I informed them, "Hey, you guys have really messed up. This is 18 USC 241 and 242, which if you want, you can pull that up. Sure. 18 USC 241. And I told them this, and they looked it up, and then they laughed. Because like this 18 USC 241 is now these are criminal, right? This is different than the civil stuff. So you can't sue under these things because you have to get the federal government to prosecute, either federal law enforcement to bring the charges or federal prosecutors to bring charges against people for violating these federal laws, because these are criminal codes with the U.S. code. 18 USC 241 is the conspiracy to deprive a person of constitutional rights under the color of law. Like, did you find it? Mm-hmm. You're sharing your screen.
Yes, I'm working on it. Right. Yeah. Well, this is the 18 USC 241 conspiracy against rights. Mm-hmm. If two or more persons conspire to injure, oppress, threaten, or intimidate any person in the state, territory, commonwealth, possession, or district in the free exercise or enjoyment of any right or privilege secured to him by the Constitution or laws of the United States, or because of his having so exercised the same, or if two or more persons go in disguise on a highway or on the premises of another with intent to prevent or hinder his free exercise or enjoyment of any right or privilege so secured, they shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 10 years or both, and if death results from the acts committed in violation of this section, or if such acts include kidnapping or an attempt to kidnap, aggravated sexual abuse, or an attempt to commit aggravated sexual abuse, or an attempt to kill, they shall be fined under this title or imprisoned for any term of years or for life or both, or may be sentenced to death.
Right. So that's the conspiracy, right? And if part of that conspiracy includes kidnapping, then it can include, a life sentence or a death penalty. Did you do 242 as well?
I just pulled up one.
Okay. 242 is 241 is the conspiracy. 242 is the actual.
Oh, because that right.
Yeah. So others can be involved with conspiring, and the law enforcement in Guilford County could be sending a bolo out for, hey, look out for this guy, try to get his ID, try to do things. That's the conspiracy, right? Mm-hmm. Those guys would be guilty in part of the conspiracy part. The James Secor guy that was put on notice, hey, I'm investigating the ADA noncompliance of your county, him telling anybody in the county, hey, watch out for this guy, try to get his ID, try to, stop him from doing an investigation, and whatever communication that he's had with his staff and the people in the county, that's conspiracy to deprive rights, right? Conspiracy to hide their ADA violations and to deny me access, equal access under the ADA. And then they kidnap me. They actually, kidnap me from the health department. And then they would kidnap me 2 weeks later because I didn't commit a crime. So they actually seized me, bound me, and moved me from one place to another. That's the definition of kidnapping, right? So what's 242 say?
Hold on. I'll get it. This one says, whoever under color of any law, statute, ordinance, regulation, or custom willfully subjects any person in any state, territory, commonwealth, possession, or district to the deprivation of any rights, privileges, or immunities secured or protected by the Constitution or laws of the United States, or to different punishment, pains, or penalties on account of such person being an alien or by reason of his color or race, then are prescribed for the punishments of citizens, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 1 year or both. And if bodily injury results from the acts committed in violation of this section, or if such acts include the use, attempted use, or threatened use of a dangerous weapon, explosives, or fire, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 10 years or both. And if death results from the acts committed in violation of this section, or if such acts include kidnapping or an attempt to kidnap, aggravated sexual abuse, or an attempt to commit aggravated sexual abuse, or an attempt to kill, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned for any term of years, or for life, or both, or may be sentenced to death.
Yeah. So the actual committing of the thing. So it's not just the conspirators, those that were conspiring with the county and the different law enforcement agencies. And the story is we're still probably a third of the way through the story right now. So there's so many other co-conspirators that can be found guilty under 241, but the ones that actually did it is a lot smaller list, and that's under the 242. But you got Keith Binfield, Matthew Michael, you get Alfonso Boyce, Vince Dougherty, Leslie Barbie, these people that were physically present that were directly complicit in the physical attacks, physical injury, and kidnapping, right? And so that's a minimum 10 years to life if found guilty, right? And that's the criminal code. And there's actually, if you go over to, it's the civil rights lawyer YouTube channel, he just covered a video on this where it was one of his cases that's a civil lawsuit, that out of that civil lawsuit, because it was civil rights violations, there was a grand jury indictment for a police officer, where they are going after him under 241 or 242 or both. So that's huge, right? Because in the civil accountability, civil lawsuit stuff, when we sue North Carolina and all these state actors, they have insurance, right? The state has insurance, the counties have insurance, the police departments and police unions have insurance, right? And so a lot of them aren't going to have to pay themselves, but the criminal part is the deterrent, and that's what he talks about over on the civil rights attorney or civil rights lawyer YouTube. So going back to the story, we're in Madison Police Department. I tell them these things like, hey, this is what you guys have done. Like, you need to stop. Like, where's your supervisor? And the supervisor was right there. There's Lieutenant Smith that came out. Now, remember, like just a few blocks away, he said he didn't have a supervisor. But Smith comes out, and I tell him, hey, man, this is illegal. Like, they had no RES. They've arrested me with no probable cause. Like, you need to let me go. And if you let me go, we can chalk it up to lack of training. I'll help you guys get the training you need, and we can call it a night, But he's like, oh, no, I'm going to do whatever my guys say. And I'm like, okay, well, then you're named in this lawsuit too, because you had a chance to do the right thing as a supervisor, and you chose not to. This is the same guy that will pop up later in the story, Lieutenant Smith. So remember that name. So about an hour at the police department, and then they finally take me to the magistrate's office, 20 minutes away at the county jail area, and we go in. Keith Benfield tries to convince the magistrate that he's got a good arrest, that he has probable cause, and he's like, yeah, this guy wouldn't give me his ID. He was in a van in church parking lot. He wouldn't give me his ID. And then so the magistrate asked me, like, so yeah, what's up? What do you got? I'm like, don't we have the Fourth and Fifth Amendments here? Like, aren't I free from unreasonable searches and seizures? Aren't I supposed to be securing my persons, papers, houses, and effects? Like, an ID's got to fall under papers or effects, right? So I'm supposed to be securing those unless he has probable cause that I've committed a crime. And he's like, yeah. I'm like, okay. And don't I have the Fifth Amendment, like, right to not incriminate myself? And if his whole thing was, I need to run your ID for warrants, which is what he said, then if I had a warrant, me giving that information would be incriminating, right? Which I didn't have a warrant. And as far as I know, I've never had a warrant. So, yeah, so he agrees with me. He's like, yeah, that makes sense. And then the cop comes and takes me and like sits me down the hallway, and he has a second attempt to convince the magistrate. He's like, okay, I was investigating a suspicious vehicle. That's what it was. Some guy told me that this van was there and it was suspicious. And the magistrate's like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. Come back up and tell us, like, what do you got to that? What's your defense for that? I'm like, okay, well, a suspicious vehicle, is that a misdemeanor or a felony in the state of North Carolina? And he's like, it's neither. It's not a crime. He has yet to say RES of a crime, right? He was still trying to fish for a crime. He told me he was looking for warrants. He wanted to run for warrants. Like, so again, we go back to the Fourth and Fifth Amendments. And he goes, okay, all right. Yeah, that makes sense. So the magistrate, and that's his magistrate, Jimmy Carter. That's this guy's name. And so he had 2 at bats, 2 swings, 2 misses, right? And then he's like, all right, you need to take him further away. So they take me at the end of the room, like down the hall, into the room, some 40 feet away, lock me in a holding cell, take me to the back of the holding cell, tell me to sit down, and then lock the door. And then they have like a ex parte communication with this magistrate. Ex parte communication is when one party talks to a judge without the other party present, right? Yeah, that's a violation, right? And so, but they're doing this for some 20 minutes to try to conspire. Remember that word, like, conspire to deprive me of rights, 18 U.S.C. 241. So eventually they figure out, oh yeah, we're gonna get him with this, So they charged me with resist, delay, obstruct in North Carolina. North Carolina does not have a resisting arrest charge. It does not have a failure to ID charge. So it has this catch-all contempt of cop charge called resist, delay, obstruct, a public officer. And that's what they charged me with. So they booked me into jail. Again, I asked for, an ADA coordinator with the magistrate during all this. He denied it. I asked to have my ADA advocate on the phone to assist me. He denied it. I asked once they started to book me into the jail, I asked for ADA coordinator, and my advocate, they denied it at the jail. They stripped me of my hat, my glasses, like they take all your clothes and put you in some prison clothes. They take my cane, then they throw me in an isolation cell, and that alone is a direct violation of the ADA. You're not supposed to put somebody in isolation because of a disability. Rejecting my ADA request and take all my protections from light violates the ADA. Rejecting my request to speak to a coordinator or to have my advocate is a violation of the ADA. So all of these are going in this lawsuit, this ADA lawsuit. And I told them, like, hey, I'm super sensitive to light. This lights in here are crazy bright. This is gonna hurt. This hurts me, and this is gonna hurt me so much that I'm gonna likely have a migraine and be unable to function. I get debilitating migraines that allows me or prevents me from moving or speaking, and that's what happened. So then, while I was in this migraine state, the quote unquote nurse came in and to do her eval. She did my blood pressure and stuff, and she's like, hey, your blood pressure's through the roof. You're likely to have a stroke and you could potentially die. I need to give you medication to get this under control. And blood pressure is directly related to like the amount of pain that you're in. But I couldn't communicate. And so they said, well, you're refusing care. And since this is the jailers, and since you're refusing care, then you're suicidal, because she said you're probably going to die. And so now we're going to strip you completely naked, put you on suicide watch. So they I can't move. So they're like, several guys come in and strip me naked and leave me on the ground naked in this brightly lit cell. So for, I don't know how many hours, because I was in there the 2 days before Mrs. Justice bailed me out. And that bail was set for $2,500, which is already excessive, because I have no criminal record, and this offense, if found guilty, doesn't hold any jail time. So they can't legally hold me in jail or put a bail on me. It's supposed to be a written promise to appear. So right off the bat, $2,500 bond is excessive. She gets me out, takes care of me, and then we wait for the court stuff to finally happen. But while we're waiting for court, we try to address these issues with the appropriate bodies. Say, hey, man, there's all these different violations. We tell them about the ADA issues. We tell them about the cops being, Fourth Amendment violations and all these things, and try to address it with the police, the chief of police, the mayor, the alderman, the town hall, right? Mm-hmm. And there's these videos are like on the channel, right? Mm-hmm. So you guys can see them for yourself. That they just would refuse to meet with me. They refused to address these issues and concede the possibility that they were breaking the law, that they are violating rights. So we on Constitution Week, like September 2020, we went. Oh, and this is, I think, after.
This is after Raleigh.
Raleigh, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. So
Raleigh was in August,
and this was. So I think they initially wanted to do court for the Madison stuff in the summer, and I tried to go to court, and they refused to let me have access to the courts with my assistive devices. The assistant district attorney, Stephanie Reese, said I couldn't go in, and she said I had to fill out a waiver of counsel form, and I said, no, I'm going to retain all my rights. And she said, well, that's not how it's done here. So they wouldn't let me in. My attorney went in. The prosecutor, asked for a failure to appear. The judge didn't go for it that time.
Same.
So then, we addressed that issue. Like, hey, this, because the ADA violation's there with the courts not letting me in, and sent that up the chain through Raleigh and through the federal DOJ and everything. Got nowhere with the town hall and the mayor and the chief of police and the county commissioners. So we're like, well, let's go to the state level. We went to the state Capitol in Raleigh, and we try to go to the legislators' offices. We go try to talk to the governor, the NCOC for the judicial side, and the what is it?
SBI.
Yes, the State Bureau of Investigation.
Mm-hmm.
So for the executive side. And when I was trying to find the SBI office, we can release, I think Mr. Justice, you might be working on a video on this already. I went there. I think Jeff was with me. Jeff is here audits to try to, hold these people accountable.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't, do well walking as far as I do. So he dropped me off at different places, and I would walk trying to find, the exact entrances and buildings and places I need to talk to. And so one of them, when I was trying to find the SBI office, I turned one driveway too soon. It's on the same property. It's state property. But I thought I was going the right way. I had my directions going and ended up going around the parking lot. Some car comes in, guy comes in, pops out. It's like, hey man, what you trying to find? I said, the SBI office. He's like, oh yeah, you just turned one driveway too soon. Just backtrack out the way you came, take the next driveway, and that's the SBI office. I was like, all right, cool, thanks. So that was it. That was the encounter. He didn't say he was a cop. He didn't ask for my ID. He didn't say, hey, you're trespassing. None of that, right? So I didn't think anything of it. I left, went out the sidewalk, went to the next driveway, went to the SBI office area. Took me a while to find the right building, and then I think some civilian contractor was like, help me find the right spot. And I got in, asked to talk to somebody about how to hold all these criminal cops and prosecutors and judges accountable. And the investigator came out, and I told her what's going on. And she took, my statement or whatever. And she's like, yeah, well, we can't really investigate any of this stuff unless the local prosecutor and the local police ask us to start an investigation. I'm like, well, these are the people I'm complaining about. These are the people that are violating rights and breaking laws. Like, so, so it was pretty crazy. So that didn't go anywhere. And then September, so we went all the way up to the state level trying to get accountability, and nowhere in state government, at the county government, at the local town government, were they willing to hold their people accountable, right? So they're like, well, what's the other way? We go to the streets and just let the people know this is what's going on, right? Mm-hmm. And we took a page out of Eric's playbook and used his 8 magic letters and put on the sign, fuck cops. And on the other side, it said, Happy Constitution Week, because this was in September during, what was proclaimed as Constitution Week. And the mayor of Madison actually issued a proclamation, and encouraged people to go out and exercise their rights.
Because rights lost are not easily regained.
So went out, one guy with a sign. She was the camera person, right?
Yeah,
recording
you guys.
And then it just turned into a shit show, right?
Oh my gosh! Somebody brought that up earlier. They're like, "You're talking at the beginning."
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I tried to get in the courthouse, and somebody goes, "Yeah," and then somebody pulled a dildo out and threatened you with it. I'm like, well, I mean,
yeah. So a mob
it was
formed.
insanity.
Like it was literally a mob that formed. Bunch of big diesel trucks rolling coal, like dumping the diesel all over us. People coming up and threatening us. And the police were right there the whole time watching this. Madison Police Department, the same police department that we were trying to correct their criminal behavior and keep them accountable. There's a bounty that they put out. I think a guy named Andy Flincham put it out on his Facebook Live or whatever.
Yeah.
He was hosting a bounty that somebody said they pay hundreds of dollars if somebody could steal my sign from me. And so people came up and attacked me and ripped my sign out of my hands and then tore it up. And they took that sign to go claim their bounty, right? And this happened in front of the mob. The police were right nearby. I think one of you guys called the police to let them know that you saw this happen. So a cop comes to try to investigate it, right? Wharf. And we're like, yeah, this is on video. We can identify the perpetrators. They're probably still back over here on this corner. Let's go over there. And instead he wanted my information, which they've already have.
Yes.
Right. But instead of identifying the criminal and stopping the criminal, right, they're more interested in trying to identify the victim. So we go to the corner. She says, yeah, he's still over here. This guy that attacked, he's still right over there. Trying to point him out, and he doesn't want to look. He doesn't want to actually. I did get the criminal, right, that attacked me. At the same time, he's like trying to get my identification. I said, well, your chief has this. You guys have all this information. He said, well, my chief isn't here. He's not working. But he was across the street thanking the mob. And we have video of him thanking the mob. And then he comes over and he's like, what's going on? And we told him, like, hey, I was attacked. The guy is right over there. And he's like, oh, let's go to the station and take your statement, instead of actually apprehending the attacker, who he just thanked personally, right? So we're like, okay, let's go to the station.
And this was in Madison, North Carolina.
Right.
Anyone just coming in.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
And they continued to follow us around, even though we didn't have a sign. We hadn't had a sign for a while. They continued to follow us around and harass and threaten, right? Say, we're going to go to your house. We're going to follow your house and your kids and shit. Yeah. So we go to the police department. They take the statement, right? We say, here's the video. Like, you can get on YouTube. It's actually still running right now live. So you can just pull it down and show, see the attack, identify these people. And like, what about this mob? Are you guys going to disperse this mob that's chasing us around? And like, oh, they have a right to be on the road. I'm like, okay, yes, if they're not doing criminal activity, but they're doing criminal activity. They're stalking, harassing, threatening, like all on your presence. And they're like, oh, we're not hearing anything. I'm like, okay. So we start to go. It's like, but we'll give you an escort home. I'm like, no, we don't want an escort home. Like, we just want you to disperse the mob. So we start to walk down the road one direction, and the cops were leading the mob. There's literally like a train of 15 trucks and cars following the police car that was going, a couple miles an hour, because they were following us on foot. And they were still yelling out their windows and yelling threats and obscenities, at us, to like that they're going to fuck us up and get our kids and all this stuff. Right. So we're like, we just finally we stopped and we like waved down the cops, like, do you hear this? And they're like, no, our windows are up. I'm like, okay, you guys are choosing not to. You're being complicit in this.
They kept saying, I just see people going up and down the streets.
Right.
I just see people using the roadways.
Yeah.
I'm like,
so we decided to like
seriously
backtrack that same way, and to prove that these guys are not just using the roadway, that they are following behind you, following us. Like,
yes.
And so we did a 180 and went the other way, and all the cars did a 180 and turned around, did a U-turn and followed us. That's not normal traffic, right? It's
Some of them
clearly
backed up real
harassment.
quick, so I didn't record their license plate.
It's clearly harassment, right? It's clearly stalking, and so
Right, and they were yelling at us as we went by.
Yeah.
Like, it
So,
doesn't
right.
take a rocket science here.
Right. Anyway, that was the beginning of that. A bunch of you guys showed up, fellow journalists, with your cameras, equipment, and stuff. I think Jeff came out later that day with his own sign, and he was attacked by the same guy and another guy, and so yeah, that's when I think somebody pulled out a dildo or something crazy, but. It was insane. So a few days later, we went back out with more of you guys.
Pepperoni audits is in the house.
Yeah, Pepperoni, you were there, and a few other people, and it was just insane, right? And the cops did nothing. They had more police officers from different counties and jurisdictions there, right? But they didn't do anything. There's a guy that came across the street holding like a broomstick or something, threatening to hit people. And they finally jumped in on that and backed the guy off, put him in handcuffs. When they cuffed him, this is the chief of police in Madison, they cuffed him in front of his body. Now, they didn't cuff the blind man in front of his body when they cuffed me, right? They cuffed me behind my back. But because this is a pro-police supporter,
A friend.
they cuffed him in front of his body, and then they just walked him like around to the town hall and then released him. They didn't even charge the man. And that same day, one of the guys, Roy Lee Reed Jr., that attacked Jeff, attacked me and stole my sign that I had that day. And a different supervisor, Lieutenant Handy, we're pretty sure witnessed it. He at least watched me rounding the corner with Mr. Roy Lee Reed Jr., and with an intact sign, and then saw that I had a destroyed sign, and the dude was running away across the street. Like, he at least saw those things. He witnessed those things. Lieutenant at the police department, Handy. And then the same little weasel, Roy Lee Reed Jr., was like within earshot of me, like running his mouth. I'm like, that's the guy, because he was talking to me before he stole my sign, and I recognized his voice. I'm like, that's the guy who just attacked me and stole my sign.
Mhm.
And then police like, oh, well, you can't be a witness. You couldn't see it.
They told you, I can't use your video as evidence. I can't use your video.
Mhm.
And then they said, I can't use your YouTube video, the live stream, because I can't get it from a third party. Then they told you, you can't identify him by his voice.
Right.
Well, then what the actual am I supposed to do here? How you just aren't interested in knowing who attacked me?
Yeah.
All the
Yeah,
evidence
You're
that we have,
complicit.
like,
Yeah, they're
it's
being
very
complicit
easy.
with the criminals, right? They're conspiring to deprive me of rights and cause injury, right?
mhm.
So the Madison Police Department, they're in deep. Like, they have so many officers that are implicated in these criminal activities.
Mhm.
It's the majority of their officers. It's pretty crazy.
Mhm.
All right, so fast forward to another protest we did at the Madison Police Department, and because we had 3 signs that were stolen already, 2 from me, 1 from Jeff.
Mhm.
We had 3 signs. Every time we've gone out with a protest sign in Madison, the protester was attacked.
Yeah.
At least if we were protesting the establishment and the criminal activity of the government. Those that were pro-government and pro-police, that were like, yeah, we don't care if they're criminals, none of them were attacked,
Oh no.
right?
But back to Blue Crew?
Yeah.
No, they were fine.
So, but they were 3 for 3, right? And so we came up with this this idea to essentially lay a trap for the government agents here, lay a trap for the police to try to get them, right? Just to show even more of the conspiracy to deprive rights.
Mhm.
And so
It's not hard.
Mrs. Justice, yeah, they're not very smart, right? So Mrs. Justice built a sign, another protest sign, and she did a video on it where she
It's
put
funny. Somebody just commented, so you're not going to mention the version?
she put razor blades on the edge of all edges, 4 edges of the sign, right?
I did a cute little video.
With a tutorial on how to build a protest sign to deter people from attacking you if you're going to go protest in Madison, North
That's
Carolina,
dangerous.
right?
These people are crazy.
Because I was attacked several times
Mhm.
holding a sign. And then on the edges, she said, danger, caution.
Edges may be sharp.
Edges may be
Caution,
sharp,
warning,
something like that,
all
right.
around, literally on every edge of this sign,
Right.
on both sides, and it's
Right.
decent.
So she posted that
font.
that video like the night before we were doing this protest at the Madison Police Department. The Madison
Mhm.
Police Department had an event where they were giving their weenies to kids, right? So they were trying to raise money for this program where they like shop with a cop or whatever, right?
Grooming
Essentially
the children.
teaching the kids to let their guards down around police officers. They're good guys because they buy you Christmas presents, right? And they thought, how are we going to raise money? Oh, we're going to give out weenies,
So gross.
So
gross.
So they had a weenie roast or whatever, and they were handing out weenies and chips or drinks or whatever. And the sign that she made had, cops rape kids written on it, because it's a fact. Cops
It's
rape
just a
kids. If
true
you're not,
statement.
if you don't think it's a fact, go to Poor Dirt Farmers YouTube.
Mhm.
And I think Poor Dirt Farmer was out with us. I don't know if on that time, but on at least the time before.
I don't remember which one's which.
But he's covered this
Like
extensively.
which
Like he's got hundreds of cops getting
Mhm.
busted for raping people, including kids, right?
Mhm.
So it's a statement of fact, and it's a good deterrent. It's a good warning. It's a good thing a pill to try to help people realize that the propaganda that these cops were engaging in, at the police department is just propaganda. Like, just because they buy kids toys doesn't mean they're good people. Doesn't mean that you should trust them. Doesn't mean they're
Right.
trustworthy. You need to keep your guard up around these criminal thugs, right?
Mhm.
So that's the sign I had. Except the sign I had didn't have any razor blades in it.
Right. Because
Because-
we know that these people are idiots.
Right. Because we figured somebody would still try to take it,
Yes. We
right?
don't
And then
actually
try to
wanna hurt
charge
anybody.
me with booby trapping or something stupid, right?
And we don't want to hurt people.
Right. We don't want people to get hurt.
Yes.
So
Don't
she
want
made
anyone to get
that
hurt.
video tutorial as a bait for them to take, right? And they took it hook, line, and sinker.
I was hoping it could also act as a deterrent.
Yeah, actually, is a deterrent.
Like,
Nobody
nobody take the sign.
that nobody
next
would
time.
take the sign.
Please don't attack him.
Yeah.
please.
I think that was the primary goal.
That was my primary goal.
That hopefully they say, oh yeah, this is dangerous. I'm not actually going to steal that guy's sign anymore. And they would stop. Right. But if they did take it, it would be empty.
Right, of course.
No razor blades. And that it would show like this conspiracy. Right. And it's exactly what happened. You can go pull up those videos because the guy stole it literally in front of the police department, literally in front of half a dozen cops. And he ran towards the cops, not away from the cops. He didn't steal it and run away from the cops. He ran towards the cops. And then he's like, oh, I guess you got me. Right. So then the chief of police literally was one of the ones that apprehended this man, Jason White. And instead of handing my sign back, they took my sign in the police department and searched it. Yep.
Peeled up the corner.
Right. We still have that. We still have that sign. We documented on video that before the theft, the corners were intact. After the theft, they peeled up the corner trying to find the razor blades. Right. And now, remember, I told you, Lieutenant Smith, the supervisor, this is where he comes back into play because he comes out and he's like, hey, yeah, we got your sign. Like, do you want to press charges? Like, well, if he comes out and tells us who he is and apologizes on camera to society for being a violent criminal, then I will let it go, But I think you guys have a duty. Like, it is your duty. It's the law that you have to charge him. Like, I don't have to press charges, but you guys do because you witnessed a felony. He's like, oh, that's not a felony. It's not worth $1,000. So it's a misdemeanor larceny. I'm like, okay, that's one of the standards for whether the larceny is a felony in North Carolina. The other is if it's taken off of your person. If somebody steals something off of your person, there's an element of violence there. And that's why it's a felony. Right. And so I educated this lieutenant, this supervisor about the law. And he actually looked it up and was like, oh, well, I didn't know that. I'm like, yeah, so you have to charge him with the felony. Like, you guys, your hands are tied. And he goes, well, I'm like, give me my sign back. Where's my sign? He's like, oh, they're on the phone with the prosecutor about your sign right now. So he lets the cat out of the bag that the prosecutor's office was in on this conspiracy to steal my sign because the prosecutor, they'd already talked with the prosecutor. The police had already talked to the prosecutor's office to say, oh, yeah, he did this video. This video is on his channel or on her channel or on the Blind Justice channel saying something like, look, she made this stuff with razor blades. And so we can get him for booby trapping. You just got to get us that sign and we'll get this guy. Right. So they had already conspired with the prosecutor's office to try to have somebody steal the sign. And so they bring it back out. The edges had been pulled up. They'd illegally searched my property. They illegally seized my property, and then they illegally searched my property. It's another Fourth Amendment violation, right? So they give it back, and they say they're charging with a misdemeanor larceny.
Does it not make a felony if the victim is disabled? Rolling.
Yeah, and it is another felony when there's a disabled element to it. It's a separate felony in North Carolina. Yes, that's exploitation of a disabled person. Yeah. So we asked for the criminal's name. They had identified him, and they wouldn't give it to us. We asked for a records request. Some of you asked the Madison Police Department for records request on this incident, and they wouldn't give us the criminal's name. They wouldn't give us the guy that they had already arrested and charged, his information. What they were releasing was my legal name, the victim's legal name. Yeah. They kept giving out the victim's legal name, but not the guy charged with the crime. We found out his name was Gould eventually, Gould, Gould. And we, I called up to the prosecutor's office to say, hey, when is this case going to be heard? I'm the victim in the case. I have victim's rights. I need to be there. You guys need to keep me informed on when it's going to be heard and, what evidence you need. I've got audio and video. I can bring other witnesses that can testify, and they never got back to me. Like they of course had my phone number, my email address. Oh, yeah. They knew where we lived, Yeah. They had all this information.
At this point, they've been to our house.
And I called several times to try to make sure that I could be there for that case. They told me it was supposed to be in February 2021, and then it got pushed back to summer of 2021. And we'd already by that time had moved out of North Carolina. By the summer of 2021, we'd already left North Carolina. So this leads us up to October 6th of 2020, when I was going to court in Rockingham County for the resist, delay, obstruct charge for being in the church parking lot. And the judge, again, was denying the ADA requests. I replied back for clarification on the ADA request stuff. What's up? It's not light coming in. It's just my head's been killing me, guys. Sorry. I mean, it is light coming in, but it's not overhead, so my hat's not gonna help me. Yeah, I'm trying to rub my head.
Okay.
Get my head zapper.
Okay.
I have this device issued by the neurology department from the VA. It's called a Cephaly. It's like a TENS unit that goes in your forehead. But yeah, so the October 6th was when the district court was supposed to be, and the judge hadn't understood the ADA request and he improperly denied it. So I was trying to get clarification. Still went up to court, went to the courthouse. They wouldn't let me in. They let my attorney in, but they shut the door on me, and they wouldn't explain what was going on. And then a few minutes later, they came back out and kidnapped me again on the courthouse steps, at the order of a Judge Grogan.
Yep.
So, and instead of taking me to the judge, for court, they took me to the jail.
I still don't understand that whole
right. If the point is, hey, you're not coming to court, we need to force them into court. Then that's what they're supposed to do, is to take you before the judge. But they didn't. They took me to the jail, straight to jail. And again, they threw me in isolation, and again, tormented me with a migraine for 2 days. And you can pick it up from there if you want.
Well, the first time they threw him in there, they put a $2,500 bond on him. And then this time we were trying to check on him because, let's see, that the next day there was like a first appearance, or I forget what it was called, but he was in the jail and his attorney came, because I walked up to the courtroom with the attorney, and the attorney was like, yeah, don't worry about it. They can't keep him. This is just silly. We'll go in, talk to the judge. Judge will release him because this is a non-jailable offense. They cannot keep him. They can't legally keep him. So he'll come home today. And we get in there, and Mike's on the video screen because they did a whatever it's called. And he was on the floor, not moving. And I got a hold of Grant. I'm like, this is not right. He's clearly not okay. I know this. And first thing, the attorney was like, hey, I want to address the condition of my client. What's going on here? He looks like he's laying on the floor. And of course, the jailers lie. Oh, he's fine. The nurse came in here and checked him out. He's fine. He's fine. He's just refusing to get up. I'm like, that's not true. I know that's not true. And you mentioned later that the nurse hadn't even been in there yet.
Yeah.
So at that point, there had to have been no nurse. So the jailer lied, just straight up lied.
Yeah.
Didn't matter. They don't care. And without presenting any reason why, the judge issued a $50,000 cash only bond requirement. And then they're going to keep him. And they said, we're going to keep him in jail on a $50,000 cash only bond. And that means no, and by saying cash only, or they said U.S. currency only, that meant that no bail bondsmen would touch that. And I think a few of you tried helping me call around to find out, because that's huge. It's a massive amount of money. And it's, again, non-jailable. Yeah. And so we walked out, and I walked out with the attorney, and he just was like shaking his head. He's just like, I've never seen anything like this before. And he was just completely dumbfounded. And yeah, it was completely insane. And so I kept calling to check on Mike, and I called, I forget which night of so 2 nights in,
Mm-hmm.
2 nights in, and I called, and the lady's like, "Oh yeah, he's fine. I just did rounds. La la la. He's fine." Well, I find out the next day that he wasn't even in that jail. They had transported him from the county jail to a maximum security prison in Raleigh, North Carolina, where they put him in isolation and wouldn't let him make any phone calls, make or receive any phone calls. He couldn't contact any of us, and we couldn't get to him.
Yeah, so it was another 2 days in jail where they were torturing me, and then 10 days in prison.
Mm-hmm.
And isolation there too. And they refused ADA requests all throughout the prison system. They wouldn't give me access to any materials, like to their prison guidebook. They wanted me to sign something saying that I had read and will follow their prison guidelines. I'm like, well, you know, you've never given it to me. Like, you won't give me any materials in audio format, like, and won't let me have access to assistive devices to be able to read digital format. So no. And eventually, Mrs. Justice gets a bank loan, a personal loan. She had to go to and beg the bank a couple times and tell them, it's for a ransom to get her husband free. And they give her, the $50,000.
The loan guy was like, "Ma'am, that doesn't sound right." I'm like, I know it doesn't sound like. This sounds insane. And he's like, "Are you sure?" I'm like, "Absolutely. I'm sure. You can call and find out. You can call the jail. They're going to tell you the same thing. That has to be cash only." He's like, "Wow, that doesn't sound right. I'll have to call you back." And I'm like, "Great." And he did. He's the one that.
But you had to go to 3 different banks, right?
Yeah, 3 different banks because the banks didn't have that much cash on hand.
Yeah.
So I had to go to 3 different banks and fill my little backpack.
Yeah. And then when she took it to the magistrate's office or to the sheriff's office, whatever, they had to count it by hand because they didn't have a money counter machine, because they don't do that.
No.
They don't issue bonds in that amount. Like, they don't do it for violent felonies.
No.
Right? And this is like, they didn't even charge me with the crime. This is what you guys don't understand. They never charged me. They have yet to charge me with failure to appear. It's a statute in North Carolina that you can be charged with. But they didn't charge me with it, and they haven't charged me with it because I was trying to get access to court. I was at the courthouse trying to get in, and their goons were the ones that stopped me from going in. And they know that's the facts of the case.
Oh, yeah. You guys documented it.
They know that if they try to charge me with that like it's going to go in the courts, and there's going to be records of it in the courts, and it's going to make them look even worse. Well, we're taking it to federal court. We're suing them in federal court on this and all these other issues that we're laying out. And this first lawsuit is just the ADA stuff. Like, we have, of course, we have the 1983 suits, and we have the key tam provision stuff that we can do. So there's a lot that's going to be happening in the federal courts with North Carolina, right? So she gets me out. And they put me on house arrest.
Yeah, that was the other stipulation, that if I did manage to somehow come up with this $50,000 in cash, that he would then have to be on house arrest, unmonitored house arrest, until
Couldn't go
whenever.
But they said I couldn't go anywhere except to have meetings with my attorney, going to court, and going to doctor's appointments. So that means like no going out to exercise, no going to the grocery store, no going to religious activities, right? None of these basic rights, basic human rights that you have. So I was still in a form of incarceration, and that lasted until we actually went to district court. And again, district court, the same Chris Freeman judge denied, all the ADA accommodations. So they just had me in there. I wasn't able to take any notes. I wasn't able to have any access to my notes or court preparation material. They didn't provide a visual interpreter for any of the video that they were playing. And then a guy named Clayton Doss, was a surprise witness of the state. So they had Keith Benfield, which is the guy we talked about, was the main crazy attacker. And they had this guy, Kyle Ray, was the supposed civilian who waved down the cop and said, "Hey, there's a van in this parking lot." It's kind of funny.
Van in the parking lot.
Right.
My.
And then they had Clayton Doss, who's a guy that works at the Madison Police Department. There's a video on the channel where we showed that Clayton Doss was released from the sheriff's office because he went to a call and within seconds, like, shot a man in the chest at his doorway in his house.
Mhm.
And that's Clayton Doss. And the other thing with Clayton Doss, now this is like in October, right, where he's testifying.
Yeah, this is the first we've heard this name for.
October or November, I can't remember. Whenever the
The
actual, I think it was October still.
I think it's
When actually the trial was, end of October. Yeah. And
I think.
so we did some research after this district court trial, right? The two officers, Doss and Benfield, testified that they didn't see any crimes in the church parking lot. The civilian witness said he didn't see any crimes in the church parking lot. They just saw a van parked in the church parking lot. So they all testified they didn't see any crime. The prosecutor, his name was Hux, that was prosecuting the case, he argued that it's okay for police to make mistakes.
Okay.
So he's arguing that these cops made a mistake. But he said that the defendant showed a lack of respect for law enforcement. And so you should find him guilty. And the judge is like, okay, guilty.
So I'm sorry. What now?
Yeah. And so then he sentenced me to 12 months of probation because that's the maximum he can do. He can't sentence me to jail time because I had no prior record.
Mm-hmm.
So he sentenced me maximum he could was with 12 months probation. That's what he did.
Mm-hmm.
And then a few days later, we appealed that decision. And he immediately, this is Judge Chris Freeman, he immediately ordered my attorney into the courtroom because he already had his snitches at the clerk's office waiting as soon as that appeal came in.
Mm-hmm.
And he wasn't even on the bench. A different judge was on the bench. So they let him know, hey, the appeal went in. So they tagged out. So that judge, that same crooked judge, Chris Freeman, could go to the bench. And then he tried to order my presence in the court while I was having a migraine and couldn't go anywhere. And he wanted me to be there in 2 hours. So they did it without me. And he's like, you know what? This is going to be an appeal bond hearing, and we're going to put another $50,000 bond on him, and he's going to go back on house arrest until this is heard in Superior Court.
So,
and this is the same Chris Freeman that denied my ADA request multiple times, that issued the threats, that if I dare show up to court with my assistive devices, he'd hold me in contempt.
He was mad.
Right? We did a video on this individual because of those ADA violations. It's titled something like "Chris Freeman Still a Jag Off?" ? Yeah. So a Jag off is a JAG officer, a judge advocate. I forget what the G stands for, but it's an attorney in the military, right? And so I explained in that video that the term that military personnel refer to JAG officers is a JAG off, right? And explain that how in the military a JAG off works at the pleasure of the commander to fry the soldiers that are in his unit, right? So he's actually not actually there for the people. He's not actually there for the soldiers. He's there for the commander. He works at the pleasure, essentially, of the state, to fry the people. And I'm like, is he still doing the same thing? And it seems like he was still doing the same thing. Right? That's the evidence that we gathered against him. So that was what that video was about. And before the district court trial, where he, ruled contrary to all the evidence that was presented to try to punish me, he called a chamber meeting with my attorney and with the prosecutor because of that video. So he was completely biased. There's evidence that he had a chamber meeting to discuss a video where he was being criticized for the crimes that he was committing. And then he still did not recuse himself, but still did the trial, heard no evidence against me, only heard evidence that none of them saw a crime.
Mm-hmm.
And the prosecutor argued that it's okay for cops to make mistakes. So he's arguing that these guys made a mistake, and he still said, okay, guilty.
Mm-hmm.
And then as soon as we appealed, he punished me greater than what the maximum sentencing allowed. Remember, the maximum sentencing allowed probation. And the punishment was $50,000 bond for appeal and house arrest. That's a form of incarceration. So they put me back on house arrest. Same stipulations, can't go anywhere except for court, meet with an attorney, and doctors. And that lasted through the 2020 elections, which means that they denied me the right to vote. They denied me the right to go and take part in the 2020 elections. So eventually it went to Superior Court, and the Superior Court judge dropped the house arrest, but kept the bond and didn't hear any reason why to keep the bond. The prosecutor didn't make an argument why. And we said, hey, this needs to be dropped too, because there was no reason ever given for this bond. And the judge's response was, well, if a previous judge did it, then what can I do about it? Well, a previous judge did the house arrest and you just dropped that. So like, it was completely insane. Like, there's no rhyme or reason. It's just more punishment, because they know that that's a personal loan that it's still costing us, like, what is it, like $10 a day or something?
It's 27 total
It's nearly $10 a day.
at this point, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nuts. Yeah, it's $10 a day.
Yeah. So
Speaking of $10, Tim Riggs gave us $10. Best of luck. I hope you stick it to them.
Thank you. Yeah. So then.
Yeah, so they still have that. So somebody asked earlier.
Yeah, they still have that 50,000.
We don't have it.
Yeah.
We still have it.
So then we had another pretrial hearing on like a venue change.
Yeah, because clearly.
And we had a friend, Peter, who testified to how he was going to a different town, not Madison, in the county, in Rockingham County, where Eric had staged a fake protest, right? He was saying, hey, we're going to go out and protest at this school and teach all your kids how to say fuck cops, you know? And Eric was never in North Carolina. He never traveled toward North Carolina, right? But he got all these crazy hillbillies in North Carolina to think that he was going to be there. So they showed up in force, like armed to the teeth, all around this school in this town. And Peter went up there to record like the response. And they had all these different law enforcement and civilians all over the place patrolling with, guns. And, because a guy said he was going to go protest with the sign that says fuck cops, who never showed up. Right. And they spotted Peter was going through recording. So they chased him out of town with their trucks, and on the highway, literally boxed him in on the highway and forced him off the road, and then came out with their guns and were like demanding to know where Blind Justice was and where Eric Brandt was, and all this stuff. Had this guy at gunpoint on the highway, like damaged his truck. And so Peter testifies to this in Superior Court during the motion to change the venue, saying like, hey, look, the newspapers have covered this, saying that this protest came out to protest one man, like these crazy criminal elements in the county, like the jury pool is polluted, and this spreads more than just Madison. And here's the evidence, here's the testimony. So and the judge didn't, he's ancient, and he talks real slow, and he kept going back and forth. He made his quote findings of fact, and he realized once he was finished a sentence, like, oh wait, no, that's actually in support of the defense. And then he was like, hold on, strike that. And he would say the exact opposite of what he just said was his fact. He was basically trying to echo whatever the prosecutor was arguing. So anyway, they denied the change of motion, the venue, and then eventually fast forward like towards the end of 2021, and we've been out of North Carolina since March or 2021, something like that.
Something like that.
The prosecution of Mr. Gould, the guy that attacked me and stole the sign that he thought had razor blades in it, because the prosecution wanted to try to charge me with booby trapping. The guy that prosecuted that case is Prosecutor Matthew Cockman with Rockingham County Prosecutor's Office. Matthew Cockman happens to be the prosecutor that's currently trying to prosecute me in Rockingham County. And Mr. Cockman did not ever reach out to me as the victim when I reached out to their office and saying, hey, I need to know this information so I can be there and be, bring evidence and testimony and all this stuff. So this shows clear prosecutorial misconduct, clear bias. He should recuse himself from the case, right? And so this is the guy that's still trying to prosecute. So there's that. But then there's the Guilford County case happened. And the Wake County stuff too.
Oh yeah.
So we forgot about the Wake County thing.
Oh, sorry guys.
So we found out at the end of 2020 that there was another charge for me out of Wake County. Remember when we went to Raleigh to try to hold all the local people accountable with state government? And I told you I was trying to find the SBI office and I went down the wrong driveway. Well, a month or so after that, I hear through the grapevine that there's a summons for me for Wake County for trespass. And I'm like, what? For what?
Right. It's gotta be a...
So we contacted them and made sure like they had the right person, the right information or whatever. Right. And they said, yeah, this is you. And I'm like, okay. So I, made an ADA request and they first did the thing via WebEx and she like explained it was, airport property. I'm like, well, I never went near airport property. I don't know what you're talking
They
about.
wouldn't give you an address.
They never gave me an address
We're
for the
like,
property.
What's the address? Because we tried to get it
Yeah.
beforehand with records requests. We're like, okay, give me the address to the property because I can look and find out. I know where you were. I can look at the
So this was 3 different counties now that had 3 charges.
just
from
complete
different counties.
nonsense charges.
And so they wouldn't give us the address where they're saying I had to trespass, and it was just insane. So eventually,
That's
like
so weird.
I had to keep getting train rides and car rides to North Carolina to go to these different cases in these different counties.
Yeah.
And eventually, I did Wake County pro se. Went in and did that in district court and had a trial, and they granted most of my ADA requests, denied some of them. So without reason. So that's, again, the Wake County people are on the hook for this in the ADA lawsuit. But the judge and that, we went into trial, and the prosecutor calls the state trooper, was the guy who popped out in this car and said, hey man, the SBI office is one driveway over, just backtrack and turn left.
The polite person.
Yeah.
Just regular person sounding.
And I'd made a motion to dismiss, but they don't have those in North Carolina, like based on lack of evidence. So I didn't know that at the time. I thought I was doing the right thing, but you're supposed to make a motion to suppress. But anyway, she said she'll hold judgment on that until she hears the evidence. So this prosecutor calls this state trooper up, and he testifies to what I just told you. Like, yeah, I found this guy wandering on the parking lot, and I told him, I could see that he is visually impaired, so I directed him where he needed to go to find the SBI office, and then he left. And the prosecutor goes, okay, well, can you identify these pictures? And the judge is like, well, you got to show the defendant. And he's like, well, how do I do that, judge? And I'm like, yeah, it's a problem because you don't have a visual interpreter that you denied me. And so he's like, oh, I'll just describe it. So I've got my adversary acting as the interpreter, interpreting these pictures. But he said he's got pictures of the signs on this fence that says no trespassing, and then a picture of me leaving the property, going down the driveway, with my cane. And I'm like, okay. So I asked, when I did cross-examination, I asked the guy if you could see the whole driveway, the left and right. The trooper was like, yeah. I'm like, okay, can you see? I was like handlebarring the edge, like with my cane. He's like, yeah. I'm like, okay. So, and there is no gate apparatus that's overhanging the cement, right? It's off in the grass somewhere. He's like, right. Okay. So I had no physical indication that this was gated. You can see that from your picture, right? He's like, right. I'm like, okay. Now, do you have any audio signs that alert people who can't see that this is a gated area, that there's no trespassing? He's like, no. I'm like, okay. So there's no physical indication. There's no audio indication. The first indication I had that I was in the spot I thought I was you coming out and saying, oh, it's next door. Right. And you didn't ask for my name. You didn't identify yourself as law enforcement. You didn't say, hey, you're trespassing. Right.
And that was really disturbing because
Right.
he didn't ask you for any
Right. So
information.
how did he get my information?
And
Well, it's because I actually found the State Bureau of Investigation, and I told them about all the criminal activity of the local police. And then when they called to follow up on that, they go, oh yeah, that guy, we're trying to screw this guy. So anything you can do to charge him to help us screw him, do it. And then so they went and reviewed all the security cameras, like, oh, well, he was on this place that's no trespassing. Yeah.
Mhm.
And so they
look.
reached out to this Trooper Moy, right? I think his name Moy, and said, hey, man, you need to write the summons for this guy for trespass. And the summons that he wrote was written like a week or two later.
It wasn't.
It wasn't the day of. Yeah, it was like a week or two later. So I asked him that question on the stand, like, why did you write this a week or two later? And he's like, oh, I was busy. No, like, who asked you to do this? Who told you to do this? And they
Objection.
They wouldn't let him answer that question. Yeah,
Real quick, jump
But-
in on that. I don't even think they gave a reason for the eviction.
it's so that she's gonna put the video together on that for you guys for the Wake County, because it gets even more crazy, because that same property.
Oh,
That same property that I happened to, step one driveway too soon on.
you can't make this stuff up, y'all.
It's still listed, or at least at the time of the trial, it was still listed as the North Carolina School for the Blind.
That's the property.
Yeah. So
In
a blind
question,
guy
yeah.
happens to stumble upon the North Carolina School for the Blind, and then they charge him with trespassing.
It was insane.
Yeah. Yeah, it's completely insane.
But the judge rendered the not guilty
Yeah, so
verdict.
the judge, after hearing the
So that was
cross examination and everything, like, I was like, I got video if you want, Judge, I can play and all this stuff. It's like, well, you could put on evidence if you want. I think I've heard a lot though.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay,
She was
well,
nice.
I'm just gonna renew my motion to dismiss based on the state's lack of evidence, and we'll go from there. And she's like, okay, yeah, not guilty. You're free to go.
Yeah, and then she called out the
And then she called out the prosecutor for like, she's like,
The
oh, I
stupid
want those
picture.
pictures that you got. If they're going to be in the case file, make sure we have those pictures, Mr. Prosecutor.
photographs.
Rubbing his nose in it. Like, you have the only evidence you have is pictures for a blind man. Like what the hell's wrong with you?
Mhm.
So that charge is gone. That one, they had no evidence. Again, this is more conspiracy to deprive me of rights, right?
Is this the Twilight Zone, bro? I don't know.
Yeah, it is the Twilight Zone. It's insane.
I don't know.
So we took care of that. So that's one less thing off the plate, right? But I made all these appearances, right, in these 3 different counties. I keep going to court,
So many
and then they granted the ADA request in Superior Court for WebEx, because there was the district court trial in High Point for the Guilford County one where they attacked me in the health department, and that judge heard testimony from Leslie Barbie, Vince Dougherty, security guard Alfonso Boyce, the main attacker, that I was never directly told to leave. It was always an ultimatum. It is always contingent on if I didn't turn off my devices.
Yeah.
So the attorney I had, Graham Holt, I told him, hey, man, here's the arguments we need to make based on the Constitution, based on the ADA. This is clear discrimination. And instead, he wanted to go with a frivolous argument, trying to say that the security guard wasn't a public officer. And I said, no, that's not true. This is not according to the state statute. Here's a state statute that says that this company police, he is a public officer, right? And I told him not to make this argument, that it was a frivolous argument, but that's the only argument that he made. And we also agreed before trial that I would take the stand and tell them exactly what was going on and how this is discrimination and retaliation, and how this guy had already had it out for me, right? He already wanted to hurt me from the previous encounters, and him, being exposed on YouTube for like 500,000 views, just being a tyrant. And so he agreed that he'd put me on the stand, but he never did. He never put me on the stand, and he made a frivolous argument and lost the case, right? And even though the prosecution didn't meet their substantial evidence burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that I committed trespass and that I resisted an officer, but we did find out that he had body cam, so that was something.
Yeah.
And we got the audio of that district court trial. So once we got that information, we did a records request from his company police, North State Company Police, for the body camera. And they said, we don't issue body camera and we don't maintain body camera footage if our guys run body camera. I'm like, well, that's against the state law. That's against the public records law, NCGS 132, because they're supposed to maintain it. There's supposed to be a custodial law enforcement agency that maintains the body camera. Even if they're not the ones that issue the body camera, they are the custodial law enforcement agency that's supposed to maintain it so that the officer isn't the one maintaining it who can tamper with it, right? It's supposed to be some continuity to protect the integrity of the evidence, right? And so once they said, no, fuck off, we don't have to give you anything, we don't maintain it, then I made that same request to, again, Guilford County, to James Secor, who's the attorney for the law enforcement for Guilford County. I was like, hey, we found out that this body camera is in existence. Like, we didn't know it was previously in existence when we asked for all the video footage to review. I said, now that we know it, and here's a specific subpart of NCGS 132 that says that this is, you're required to release this to me, right? And he never responded. This is back in like August 2021, right after we found out that they had this. He doesn't respond until like a week ago. James Secor, a week ago, and this is after. We'll come back to this when we'll come back to James Secor.
Oh,
so,
we heard nothing.
Yeah,
We didn't hear anything else about that.
but that body camera has been maintained by the officer that attacked me, that put me in the hospital with another brain injury, and I have wrist damage. He's the only person that's been maintaining it up until district court trial, when he gave whatever version he gave to the prosecutor.
Who knows?
Right. And we don't know what version that is. We do know that it stops at some point, but he was still on duty. He testified to being on duty for at least another hour to 2 hours from where the video stops. So what's the other parts of the body camera show? Does it show him? What does it show him doing with the unconscious victim, his unconscious victim, right? What other stuff did he do to me? It should show, somebody taking me to and from places, right? And this conversation with the magistrate and who dumped me outside, right? Unconscious. But he didn't, that wasn't played in district court. So he gave an edited version to the prosecutor, right? He withheld evidence because he tampered with it, because it's criminal evidence against himself. It's exculpatory evidence to me, because if this is how it's exculpatory, even though it's post-arrest, it shows the complete contempt and malice that he had towards me if he's willing to do those things to somebody that was unconscious. Then, of course, like, that shows contempt and malice towards the individual that he already had pre-arrest, right? So that's how it's exculpatory. So anyway, I appealed immediately in open court because she's like, yeah, probation. She's going to put me on probation, right? And she already asked my attorney where I was living, like, for an address. And then she asked me directly to give her an address. And I said, hey, no, you're not entitled to that. Like, I don't want to be retaliated against, my family be retaliated against by law enforcement in the other state that we live now. So no. And she's like, well, I want the probation officer to to come up here. I'm like, well, I just appealed you in open court, so I'm not going on probation, because you had a de novo, you had a redo in superior court. And she goes, well, we'll still wait for the probation officer to hear what they have to say. So she comes in, and the judge's like, do you need his information at all? It's like, wait, well, I mean, he just appealed you, right? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, then no, he doesn't have to report to us at all. That goes to superior court. That lady's like, I don't want to be named in this lawsuit. She's like,
No.
Probation lady.
No.
Yeah. So I didn't retain my attorney after that for that case because he completely botched it.
Oh my gosh.
And so I've been doing that one pro se.
Pause.
David Brown gave us $20
And said, I think it was David. No, David S. said your tinge unit is distracting because it looks like you're wearing a Wonder Woman costume.
Oh, thanks. It's helping me.
Yeah, let's let it help.
My head's killing me. But thanks for the super chat.
Yeah, David Brown.
David. Yeah, so then now both cases are in superior court, right? So we have a superior court case for Rockingham County. That's the Pokemon Go thing. We're in the church parking lot. It's still facing. We have the superior court case for Guilford County where they attacked me in the health department, right? I did ADA requests for the pretrial stuff. We had a few pretrial hearings for both of those, and they granted almost every ADA request I made in Superior Court, except for providing a visual interpreter. And since it was pretrial hearing where there was no evidence that was going to be presented, there were no witnesses, there were no jurors, it was just going to be like quick, like figuring some logistical things out or whatever. I agreed to that level of accommodation without a visual interpreter because there's no evidence that they need to be interpreted. It's just me talking to a judge basically, and maybe a prosecutor chiming in every once in a while, right? But they also said that I could use my video recording devices for visual notes. They granted that in Superior Court in North Carolina. So that was the other reason why I was okay with not having a visual interpreter for the pretrial stuff, because I could review all the visual information with a loved one who can tell me what I missed in the body language and the facial features or whatever with the judges during that short pretrial hearings that we did via WebEx from this seat, from where I'm sitting right now in my house, right? So they did that for 4 pretrial hearings, 2 in Rockingham County, 2 in Guilford County, right?
Woo.
And then, well, the 2 for Rockingham County was my attorney hijacking. It was supposed to be a trial date, but he was hijacked the trial date to withdraw because I was
trial date.
I was having problems with him. And this is in Rockingham County where they had that $50,000. It cost us $10 a day, and he knew this, right? Still costing us $10 a day. But so I told him, like, hey man, yeah, I don't want you as my attorney because you've not done anything for me for getting equal access under the ADA. You're not responsive to my emails. Like you don't want to do any defense strategy. Like I keep telling you, this is what we need to do. And you want to do whatever you want to do. And his whole strategy says, I'm just going to go in and react to whatever the prosecutor does. Like, well, that's not preparing a defense. That's literally the opposite of preparing. Yeah. Yeah. He's been 0 for 2 and I'm 1-0, you know? So I'm like, I'm good without you, man. Like you need to kick rocks, but the judge wouldn't let him go the first time. So he re-upped his withdrawal because I specifically said, you're fired, like in an email, like in December. And so then he did another one in January. He hijacked my January date, early January. And the judge said, okay, fine, you can withdraw. So I'm pro se in both cases in Superior Court. And so then the next date they gave me was January 24th. Now we're finally in 2022, right? So that was just a week or 2 ago, January 24th. And we made the trip to North Carolina because the judge denied the ADA request that that was previously granted for Superior Court to be able to do. It was pretrial stuff. He didn't give an explanation. He just denied the WebEx that was already granted, an accommodation already made. Again, this video is about the ADA lawsuit that we're bringing against North Carolina and all these state actors. So this judge is Judge Albright. He's one of the chief violators of my rights under the ADA, and he's named in this lawsuit. Okay. And he, without cause, denied the WebEx hearing for pretrial. He denied my glasses, my hat, and all my electronic devices.
First, he denied everything.
Well, yeah. Initially, it was you can't do it. You can't use anything.
Initially, it was you get nothing.
Right.
Be here. It's like what?
And so then I responded and clarify, like, you know, these are some of the things I need, and here's some of the reasons why. Right. I didn't spell it out in explicit detail because a lot of it is basic. A lot of it is just simply understood. But he still, after getting my explanation, denied my glasses and my hat and recording devices.
And a visual interpreter.
Denied the visual interpreter.
And the WebEx.
Yeah, and the WebEx. So then I replied again. I said, hey, man, I have to have these things. And here's some reasons why. And I gave the reasons why again. And he said, okay, yeah, I guess that makes sense with your hat and glasses because of, hearing your explanation. But his reason for denying the hat and glasses literally was, I don't know. He's like, I don't know how this would help you. So denied. And that is completely, like, directly in violation of the ADA because it says for them to make a denial, they have to not just argue how granting the request would change the fundamental of the proceedings, fundamental elements of the proceedings, but they have to demonstrate it. They have to prove it, not just claim it, not just argue it, right? And his whole thing was, I don't know. So then he allowed the hat and glasses, but it still denied the recording devices, He said I could take my phone and my headset so I can have access to my notes. I can have an auxiliary aid, and my white cane, and I think that was it. Batteries and chargers for my headsets and phone.
Mhm.
Right.
And then he said he was gonna make the audio. He would give me the stuff from the court reporter as an account accommodation.
Mhm.
So I go with my auxiliary aid. Well, hold on. Let's back up. So the week before, we don't get this communication from him until Friday. Like Friday, like right before noon is when he first says, no.
Right.
Actually, he initially said no on the 11th. Through Barbara Rebb is his trial court coordinator, who's also the disability access coordinator at Superior Court in Rockingham County. We got an email from her on the 11th, which was the day we had the WebEx where the judge said that he grants the withdrawal from my attorney. And so it's like, I still need to know what ADA accommodations will be made, for the 24th. And it came back nothing. She said no accommodations.
Right.
You have to be present in court. And so then I followed up that same day with detailed ADA accommodations request, and didn't get a response until the Friday before court, and court was on Monday, and it was like around noon, and he's like, okay, you can't have this and this. And then I responded, and so and it went back and forth until like 3 something late the day before, right? One business day before you're supposed to be in court. Again, this is supposed to be handled administratively, and he was trying to handle it administratively, supposedly, but he's a judge, so he shouldn't have been handling it at all. It should have been the administrator, the disability access coordinator, Barbara Rebb herself, should have been handling this, right? But she was just relaying messages from the judge, so it shouldn't have been the judge at all. This goes back to where we started this video, where they have zero training in North Carolina at any level.
And then they put it off to the last minute when you have to be there in person. Like all of a sudden, like, okay, yeah, no, we're going to revoke the way that it's been doing it these other 4 times. Now you have to be here in person, get here or whatever.
So, the other thing was on Wednesday or Thursday, the prosecutor, Matthew Cochran, emails me and says, hey, there's this motion to continue, and if you agree to it, then we'll move the date from Monday. Just let me know. Well, he sent it to me in a image format, so I couldn't even read it. So I was like, hey man, I can't read this, and this to me in an OCR format so I can read it. He never responds. So then I reach out to Barbara Rebb, who's the disability access coordinator. I say, hey, I need this in OCR format so I can read it. Because right now, this prosecutor's having ex parte communication. I'm not in receipt of this.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't respond. So then I go to the state level, Lori Cole at the NCAOC in Raleigh, and say, hey, I don't know what's going on. These people aren't giving me the stuff in the OCR compatible format, which was agreed upon. Like it's been a well-established accommodation so far from both counties.
Right.
That they have to give it to me in that format so I can read it.
That's old. Like, that's like
It's been for months.
basic.
Been established for months. And so eventually Lori Cole gets involved because I leave her a voicemail too. And she's like, I'm working on fixing this, getting them to fix it. And then a minute later it comes in from Barbara Rebb, not from the prosecutor, from Barbara Rebb. And it's converted and I can read it. And it's his motion to continue because the prosecutor, Matthew Cochran, was positive for COVID.
Somebody posted, just when you think the story is done, it gets worse. Yes.
Oh yeah.
Stay with us.
Here you go. So he's saying, the prosecutor said, hey, I need to continue the case because I'm positive for COVID.
Don't say it. You got to say something else or YouTube's going to freak out.
He's positive with the coof. And yeah.
Yes. Seriously.
And so he's like, I need to move this out because I have to follow our quarantine guidelines for the county. And I'm like, okay, well, that makes sense. And he just wanted to move it 2 days, like to be outside of the quarantine thing and to make sure he was asymptomatic before going into court.
Right.
Right.
Gets a negative test and is asymptomatic.
Right.
Because as of then, it was positive.
Right. And he was still symptomatic.
Yeah, he was
So
sick.
the judge, actually, before I could even respond to that, because they took forever to get it to me in a way I could read, the judge said, no, you're going to be in person. So he ordered this prosecutor that he knew had tested positive with the COOF to be present in the court and for me to be present in the court. So he should have said, no, we need to continue this out because we still haven't established full accommodation for the person with disabilities.
Right.
Because that gives us time to get that established in an administrative setting, an administrative way, and to make sure the prosecutor is safe to enter the courtroom. Right? That's what should have happened.
To
That's
follow
not what
our own guidelines
that's
that
not
we're
what, and
forcing
follow
other
the
people.
law. Yeah, that's not what happened. Right? Instead, he said, no, you both be present Monday morning. So I show up Monday morning.
And he knows that you can't tolerate the mask.
Right. And they already agreed to the ADA accommodation for me going without a mask because I can't tolerate one medically. Right. So he knew that I wouldn't be wearing a mask and that I would be next to the prosecutor that was positive and symptomatic. Also, that I had an auxiliary aide coming with me, and the guy I had with me tested himself to make sure that he wasn't bringing anything to the court, like the morning of, because he had some cough like beforehand. He had a cough like a couple of days before, so he's testing himself to make sure he wasn't positive. He tested
The
negative.
days leading up to it.
Yeah, and he tested negative Monday morning. I was like, all right, cool. I was like, I don't have it, so let's go. So we go in, and the judge, like the room was super bright, so I put my scarf around my glasses to help block out the light. Still had my hat on. And when he calls up, like he addresses that. He's like, hey, you need to take that blindfold off. I already said, you're not wearing your sunglasses. I told you can wear your hat and glasses. Like, this is just theatrics. I'm like, no, I'm actually wearing the sunglasses. It's brighter than I anticipated. I need to protect myself for the same reasons that I told you I wear the hat and glasses. Like, this will render me unable to communicate. I have a migraine. Like, and he's like, you need to take it off. He's like, tell me, take it off, like raising his voice at me, threatening me. And I established a way of communicating with my auxiliary aide to inform him that, hey, you can't use threats, coercion, and intimidation. Like, that's a violation of the ADA. It's 42 U.S.C. 12203, right? And you can write that down because we'll pull it up in a minute.
Say
right?
it again.
42 U.S.C. 12203.
Okay.
From Title II of the ADA, right? And so he's like, well, I'm not. So my auxiliary aide, speaks up. He's like, hey, he's indicating that you're using threat and coercion, and that this is agreed that it wouldn't happen. And he goes, well, I'm not threatening you, Mr. Nelson. I'm not ordering you yet, even though that's not how the English language works. If somebody's saying, do this, take off the blindfold, I'm telling you to take off the blindfold. Mr. Nelson, take off that blindfold now. That's an order. He ordered me like multiple times, right? He's trying to play legal gymnastics by trying to say, oh, I didn't say I am ordering you. Well, you did order me, right? And so then he goes, he said, well, I'm not ordering you. I'm asking you to take it off. I'm like, okay, well, thanks for that clarification. Let me clarify. I'm making an ADA request for accommodation for effective communication, that I'd be allowed to use this blindfold for the same reason that I told you I need the sunglasses and the hat, because bright lights, like exposure to light, affects me negatively because of my disabilities, and I will have a migraine and be unable to communicate. And so then he backed off of that. But then he went on to something else. And he's like, well, okay, well, I've got this waiver of counsel form then I need you to fill out. So he has like the bailiff come over and try to give it to me. So like this paper's flapping in my face. I'm like, Judge, no, I can't read any paper. Like, again, you agreed to the accommodation that all documents would be sent to me via email in OCR compatible format so I can read it. Like, I can't read paper documents.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, oh, well, that's why you have an auxiliary aide. I'm like, no, that's not why I have an auxiliary aide. The auxiliary aide wasn't there as a visual interpreter. He was there to help me with PTSD and to help me with TBI. The only thing he was there for the visual stuff was to actually transport me to the courthouse, like via car and back, and to help me get in through security into the defense table, because I didn't know where it would be. So he's going to just help me with those things to guide me. And then also to speak up whenever somebody wasn't introducing themselves before speaking. Those are the only three things that had to do with the visual impairment that he was authorized to do on my behalf, that we had agreed to before court. He was not authorized to act as a visual interpreter, right? I didn't want him to do that. He's not trained to do that. I didn't trust him to do that. He didn't agree to do that. But the judge then takes it upon himself to order my auxiliary aide to take the piece of paper and read it to me. And so that's a direct violation of 28 CFR 35.160 subsection C. But it's also a violation of 42 U.S.C. 12203, which is the first one I just gave you. It's both. So I'm going to pull that one up because he ordered him. He literally said, because he he told the bailiff, we'll give it to his auxiliary aide. And I said, don't accept that. I told him, don't accept that. And then so he tells the judge, he's telling me not to accept that. And the judge's like, I am ordering you to take that and read it to him. So that's or judge's order holds behind it the threat of contempt. If you don't do what a judge orders you to do in court, he can hold you in contempt, which means he can throw you in jail. And that's a threat. That's coercion. That's intimidation. It's interference with a person trying to get equal access to goods and services. And that's what 42 USC 12203 says he can't do. It's a violation of the law. So that's how court started. And let me back up. On Friday, I filed a motion to dismiss based on the ADA violations, right? Because again, I told you there's no motion to dismiss based on lack of evidence in North Carolina. You have to do a motion to suppress. I already had one of those in and filed motion to suppress based on this lack of evidence. But I filed a motion to dismiss based on the ADA violations because there's only a few different ways you can do a motion to dismiss if the defendant's dead, right? If it's beyond the statute of limitations, if the statute that they're trying to prosecute the person on is unconstitutional. And then the other one is if there's constitutional rights violations of the defendant so much that it won't allow the defendant to have due process, right? Their ability to prepare a defense is trampled on because of the constitutional rights violations. And so that's the one that's North Carolina General Statute 15A-954 subpart 4.
Oh, I missed it. Take it.
NCGS 15A-954. It's like A4.
Okay. I got the other ones.
Mm-hmm.
Can we pull those
All right,
out?
yeah, go ahead.
All right. So we got 42 USC 12203, prohibition against retaliation and coercion.
Yeah.
Oh, I should share this. Whoopsie. Sorry. Got it? Yeah. Okay. Let me make it. We have A. Wait, we started A? 12203.
Yeah, go ahead.
Retaliation. No person shall discriminate against any individual because such individual has opposed any act or practice made unlawful by this chapter, or because any such individual made a charge, testified, assisted, or participated in any manner in an investigation, proceeding, or hearing under this chapter. B. Interference, coercion, or intimidation. It shall be unlawful to coerce, intimidate, threaten, or interfere with any individual in the exercise or enjoyment of, or on account of his or her having exercised or enjoyed, or on account of his or her having aided or encouraged any other individual in the exercise or enjoyment of any right granted or protected by this chapter. And then remedies and procedures. Remedies and procedures available under sections.
That's fine.
Numbers. Okay.
Yeah.
Numbers.
Yeah, so he's made threats and coercion and intimidation towards me about the blindfold, and then he made it against my auxiliary aide to force him to read. Do you have the other one?
Yeah.
28 CFR?
Yeah. 1 second.
35.160.
Let me share it real quick. Boop. 28 CFR? Yeah. Okay. 35.160, you said C?
Yeah.
Bloop, bloop. Okay. A public entity shall not require an individual with a disability to bring another individual to interpret for him or her.
There you go.
There you go.
So they denied the request for visual interpreter, and they instead were trying to force the person I brought with me to act as my interpreter. Then you can also pull up 42 USC 12201.
We did again. Wait, we did that one earlier, right?
12201.
12201.
You did 12203 before. 42 USC 12201.
Okay, construction.
Go to subpart D.
D. Oh yeah. Okay.
Accommodations.
Accommodations and services. Nothing in this chapter shall be construed to require an individual with a disability to accept an accommodation, aid, service, opportunity, or benefit which such individual chooses not to accept.
Right. So basically, what that's saying is the person with disability, i.e., me, can't be forced into court unless I accept the level of accommodation that's being offered. Right. And I didn't accept the level of accommodation that's being offered, but it's either I show up or be arrested again,
Right,
and thrown in prison,
Forceful.
and they take that $50,000. Right. So that's what they're doing. They're forcing me to go in without accepting the level of accommodation because they refuse my ADA accommodations to be able to take notes with my recording devices, to have a visual interpreter, to have access to the visual information in court. And then he was trying to force my auxiliary aid to be my interpreter. He then was asking the prosecutor like what evidence he had, what videos and stuff, and he's like, "Yeah, I've got all these like 7 videos, and it's like 3 hours worth of body camera and dash camera." And he's like, "Okay, well, you need to make that available for the defendant to review." And I said, "Okay, Judge, I can't review video without a visual interpreter." And he goes, "Oh, well, we're not going to provide a visual interpreter. I told you we denied that request because the NCOC says we don't contract with any certified interpreters." And I already offered him a different service. It's called IRA.io. They have visual interpretation services that's global, like online. And he said, no, it's not good. Use the person you have with you as your interpreter. And I'm like, no, you can't do that. So let's go to 28 CFR. Same?
Mm-hmm.
Goodness. 28 CFR 35.177.
$35,177. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Here you go, guys. Vet Tech Kimmy, $10. Stay the course, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, 28 CFR 35.177, effect of unavailability of technical assistance. A public entity shall not be excused from compliance with the requirements of this part because of any failure to receive technical assistance, including any failure in the development or dissemination of any technical assistance manual authorized by the Act.
There you go.
So not having it
It's not a valid excuse, right? Him saying that, well, we don't have a contract to have visual interpretation services.
It's just
Therefore, we don't have to give it to you. Like that's literally against this statute, against the ADA directly. 28 CFR 35.177.
So how does that work? Somebody comes in and speaks Spanish,
Mhm.
let's say, and they don't speak English, but they got wrapped up in this court system. And they come in and the court goes, "Sorry, we don't have any Spanish interpreters." But you have to stand before the
that's
judge
not an
anyway?
ADA thing,
It's-
but
no,
but
it's-
it is equal access to the course. And
Yes.
and there's case law on that specifically that says no, they have to provide interpretation.
Right. I'm just saying that all by itself.
Yeah.
Like that's not bringing the ADA
Yeah.
into it.
Yeah, well, there's a whole chapter of North Carolina General Statutes, it's NCGS 8B, that says that they have to provide interpreters for the hearing impaired. There isn't one for the visually impaired. And
Right.
I argued this finally whenever we got the motions. We didn't get to the adjudication of the case until nearly 5 p.m.
And it
Now,
was
we
still
went in
pre-
at 10 a.m. Actually, we went in
Mhm.
before 10 to be early. But
Oh,
so he basically said, okay, prosecutor, you got all this video. You need to make it available to review with the defendant. You need to go to this other room and make this 3 hours of body cam dash cam available for him to review. And I'm like, Judge, I don't have a visual interpreter. You need to provide me one if you want me to have access to these videos. And he goes, no, use
what you want to
use
have.
your auxiliary aid. And I'm like, you can't force me to use my own person as an interpreter. We just covered that.
Mhm.
And so he's like, well, you guys need to go ahead and exit stage right or whatever, get out of here. So the case is in recess until 3 p.m. Have some lunch, review the videos or whatever, and come back. So when we were leaving, somebody from the audience said something. I wasn't able to make it out, and I'm closer to the audience than the judge. So the judge definitely didn't hear it. But we can actually hear it in the court reporters. You can't hear him, but you can hear the aftermath and the court reporters' recordings that we have. Because it's the same Peter, the guy who previously had taken the stand for the motion to to change venue, saying that he was attacked, run off the road by crazy people in the county, demanding to know where Blind Justice and Eric Brandt were, right? And Peter had also acted as my auxiliary aide on previous occasions in court. So he's previously been an advocate for me, been somebody that's helped me to enjoy equal access to the courts. And that's what he was doing Monday morning on January 24th. He simply was shaking his head when the judge was threatening me to take the blindfold off, when he was threatening my auxiliary aide to read. He was showing, disapproval,
as most of you are doing right now,
of what the criminal judge was doing, right?
Yeah.
And then when the case was recessed until 3 p.m. and we were leaving, he said, "Hang in there, Mike." That's all he said, in a voice so low that I couldn't even hear. But he was trying to encourage me with getting equal access in the courts. And again, that's directly out of 42 USC 12203, right? That a judge, that anybody can't threaten, coerce, intimidate, and interfere with a person who's encouraging another person with a disability in enjoying equal access.
Enjoying rights protected.
Yeah, like equal access because of the disability, right?
Right. Stephen Jenny, $20. Said, "Y'all are true American heroes. Hope you win in court and expose the corruption."
Thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate that. So then the bailiff goes and tattles on Peter and tells the judge, "Hey, this guy, I know this guy, he was part of this demonstration, previously with this case or whatever." And so the judge's "Hey, you stand up and identify yourself." So Peter stands up. He's like, Why do you want me to identify myself?" He's like, "I need to know who you are. Give me your, give us your identification." He's like,
So I know.
"But why? I don't understand. Why are you asking me to identify myself? You haven't asked anybody else here to identify themselves." He's like, there's been threats in this case, and we need to make sure that everybody's safe and yada yada. BS excuse. The reason that tyrants give for eroding rights is your safety, right? And he's just playing right down that playbook. And not only that, but this case is about ID. This whole case that this judge is supposed to be hearing about is about a state actor demanding somebody produce ID when they have no authority to do so. And what is the judge doing in court? He's doing the exact same thing. He's a state actor demanding that a person that's in the audience, that's as an observer, give ID when there's no state requirement for that. He's not backed by the law in any way. It's a violation of the man's Fourth Amendment rights, right? And so he just simply asked, Peter asked, why are you asking for this? And then the judge, bailiff, kick him out. So they have hands on him and they pull him out of the courtroom. So then he was standing outside, trying to listen in because he's hearing impaired too. So that's the other thing, and the judge kept raising his voice. The judge would get belligerent with him and raised his voice at this man, threatening him, right? Because he was trying to encourage me. With
one little phrase during a recess type situation,
right?
Nuts.
And then the bailiff's "Oh, he's still back here at the door." And the judge's "Okay, well, you need to, kick him off the courthouse, to get him out of the courthouse completely." But then the judge engaged with him. He's "So what is your name, sir? Tell us your name." And he's "Why are you asking me my name when you haven't asked anybody else their name here?" And he hadn't, except for the litigants that when he went through his docket, he knew those people that were in the room to do a case, but all the other observers or witnesses, he didn't identify. So he just singled this man out because the bailiff knew that he supported me and that he acted as an auxiliary aide for me before, and he testified on my behalf before, and he had him kicked out of the courtroom. And not only that, when we came back after lunch at the 3 p.m. thing, he didn't hear the case until around 3:40 or less when he called us, and then he had a 15-minute break. So it was almost 4 p.m. I think before we started again. But they lowered the lights down, so I didn't have to wear my blindfold. Yeah, so I thanked him for that. But then he went on a rant for an hour and a half. The judge was calling his own witnesses. He had the prosecutor from district court that magically appeared. And he said, "Hey, did you in district court, was the defendant present and did you play video?" I was "Yeah." Okay, so he had a chance to review the video. And I was and he's "Yeah." I'm and so I asked questions "Did you guys provide a visual interpreter?" I'm "No, there's no visual interpreter presented at district court. And I wasn't able to keep notes. So I don't know what these videos have. I've never been able to see them. Nobody's ever interpreted those videos for me, these body camera and dash cam videos. And then he goes, okay, what about before district court, Mr. Prosecutor? And he's like, oh yeah, he was given a chance to do it at the police department, to review video at the police department. And he's like, is there anybody here that can testify to that? And he's like, yeah, the chief of police, like
Oh,
Jason White,
whoa, from a whole nother town.
magically appeared from 20 minutes away in the exact same courtroom where a judge needs testimony.
And we had the witness list for.
And Jason White was never on the witness list.
Neither
So,
was
so the
us.
judge had some kind of ex parte communication with the prosecutor, or he did an ex parte investigation and called his own witness and told the chief of police to show up to testify on the judge's behalf. This testimony is that he was trying to get in the record is specifically for the judge's benefit, for the record. Because again, this is not
Really
any adjudication of the case is not happening. This is all before we started hearing motions. We have pre-trial. We were supposed to be there to hear pre-trial motions. I had a pre-trial motion to dismiss based on lack of due process. I brought that to his attention early in the morning. I was like, hey, I don't think we need to be doing anything, Judge, until we handle the due process issue here. I currently do not have due process. That's what we need to handle before we do anything else. Otherwise, you're on notice that I don't have due process, and you're still parading me around the courtroom, like discriminating against me, saying, look at the blind guy. Look at all the ways we're making accommodations for the blind guy. And that's what he did this whole time up until nearly 5 p.m. Right? He was trying to make a record to say, look, we're making all these accommodations for the blind man. Look at how I'm doing a good job as a judge, being accommodating. And I'm making sure that he had every opportunity to review video, even though he's blind. And none of these guys provided a visual interpreter. And not only that, they said I couldn't take notes while even listening to the audio of the video. I couldn't take notes. And again, I don't just have visual impairments. I have brain damage. I have long-term memory loss. So we're talking about stuff that happened 2 years ago, right? So yeah, I don't remember what was in those videos, what the audio had. Sorry. So he kicked it off by having the deputy testify on why he kicked the guy out of the room. And then he said, okay, yeah. The deputy was like, yeah, this was a guy, Peter was this guy that he was a supporter. He'd been part of this protest for this case back in October 2020. He stayed outside the courthouse and protested it. And the judge is like, oh, so he protested the prosecution of Mr. Nelson. And he's like, well, no. And then the deputy's like, well, no, they were protesting that we wouldn't let him in with his electronic devices. So he actually said the right thing. Like, no, they were protesting the discrimination, the violations of rights protected by the ADA and the 5th and 14th Amendments. Like, that's what the deputy swore to, right? But then the judge rephrased it again. He's like, oh, okay, so they protested the prosecution of him. Like, no, it wasn't the prosecution. It was that you guys wouldn't let me in the courthouse with equal access. But the judge overrode that testimony and restated what the witness didn't say, which is an objection. And I didn't make it because I was didn't know what the hell was going on. It's crazy. The judge was calling his own witnesses to protect himself
and questioning his own witnesses.
Yeah. He was acting as prosecutor, and it was so crazy.
Holy Grail, $20. Thank you. Yeah, it was
so
utterly nuts.
Yeah. So then, but the deputy, I think it was Gibbs. He said, and he was one of the guys that kidnapped me from the courthouse steps on October 6, 2020. Yeah. So he's definitely named in the lawsuits. But he said that they kept me from going in. He straight up testified that he himself kept me from going in the courthouse because of my electronic devices. Under oath. It's just crazy. I'm like, yeah, okay, there you go. You just, yeah. That testimony is going to definitely be used against him in federal court. So the judge said, okay, so then what else happened? He's like, oh, we got all kinds of threats. People called in from all over the world. It's a world event. People called in from all over the world threatening to injure or shoot deputies or something like that. And he's like, okay. But he didn't ask, did you identify any of these people that made these threats, or where they were, or where they were from, or if they were local, or if there was a credible threat?
Do a threat assessment.
Right. None of that. No questions of that came out in any way. It was just oh man, there's a threat because somebody said that they're going to do something to deputies, from anywhere around the world. Right. And so the judge is like, okay, since there's a threat to deputies, that means that I'm now justified in identifying every person that comes in the courtroom. And so he made a rule in this case. He said, now I'm ruling that anybody that comes into the courtroom will have to identify themselves and tell the court the reason why they're here.
Let's stop for a
So
sec.
if anybody wants to go in to court for this case, this is what this judge is ordering. Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
So what time of day was that?
What?
That he just rendered his little order that they have
It was
to,
like around 4 p.m.
so 4 p.m. So this threat was so severe that he
Yeah.
had no knowledge of it
Right.
when this started
Right. Exactly.
and didn't find out about it
Yeah.
and didn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
Didn't have any, like,
So
if it
the
was actually a concern.
supposed threat happened 2 years before. Yeah.
Yeah, supposed threat. Yeah.
Yeah.
If it was actually a concern, wouldn't they have, like, I don't know, planned ahead?
Right.
Maybe
exactly.
there's actually a threat.
But-
Clearly there wasn't.
Right.
Clearly there
No.
was no threat.
And he just didn't like that that somebody was standing up for his rights
Yeah.
in his courtroom. And so since Peter stood up for his rights, it was simply asking for the judge's reason why he was demanding ID. The judge kicked him out.
He never said no. I don't think he just was
Yeah.
like, what?
And then made an order that anybody that wants to go to courtroom,
Has to-
has to produce ID and tell them reason why they're there.
Yep. Huzzah.
Yeah. So in that break during the lunch thing or whatever, like we did listen to some of the audio, and he was missing a ton of body camera and dash cam stuff.
Mhm.
He doesn't have any body camera dash cam from DOS that he's claiming
Oh.
was on scene.
Hmm.
Remember the guy that shot the dude in the chest?
Mhm.
Because we know for sure that Keith Benfield and Matthew Michael were on scene, and
Yeah.
2 guys from Maiden Police Department were on scene.
Yeah, they were me.
So 4. But DOS testified in district court that he was there. But they've never produced any dash cam or body cam video of Clayton Doss. And in fact, when the judge called Jason White to testify on what video they offered for me to review with my attorney at the Madison Police Department before district court trial, the chief of police said, yeah, we had Benfield and Matthew Michael's body cams
Mm-hmm.
and a dash cam from Benfield. No mention of DOS.
Nope.
And this is the chief of police testifying to this. Right? That's because DOS wasn't there. He was never there. But they allowed him to testify. And he's still on the witness list. They plan on calling him in Superior Court to say that he was on scene. Well, the other thing about Clayton Doss is this. Clayton Doss was the guy who went around soliciting all these businesses in Madison to ban me from their stores
Mhm.
when I'd never set foot in. Like
No.
10 stores banned me, and 7 out of the 10 I never stepped foot in.
It
One
is-
of those stores is Clayton Doss's own store, a wine store that he opened, and he banned me from the store before it even opened,
Mhm.
before he opened the business.
Yeah, it wasn't even open until the
So
end.
talk about a conflict of interest. Talk about a not credible witness.
Yep.
Very much issue with the character of the witness. Not only that, but he was one of the officers on scene the first day we were mobbed, when Jeff was mobbed and attacked, and his
That's right.
sign was stolen, and Roy Lee Reed Jr. stole his sign. Roy Lee Reed Jr. was only a few feet away holding
there.
Jeff's sign
They're both
when
in the
Clayton
camera.
Doss was right there. And Jeff's like, oh, the guy that stole it is right there. That's my sign. He stole my sign. And what did Clayton Doss do? Instead of apprehending the man, because the evidence is right there,
In his hand.
he takes Jeff and says, hey, come with me over here and let me get you your identification. Again, he's tried to identify the victim instead of apprehending the criminal,
Mhm.
the suspect that has the stolen property in his hand. That's Clayton Doss from the Madison Police Department, who still works at the Madison Police Department and who is still on the witness list for the prosecution, right? Talk about a not credible witness, right? Not only that, but the CAD report, you guys, this is all public record. You can ask for body cam and dash cam for Clayton Doss from Madison Police Department from February 21st, 2020, between the hours of 9:45 and 10:45. They're not going to get it to you because it doesn't exist. Ask for the GPS data where his car is. We did that, and they said, "Oh, that's personnel file. It's
What the
privileged
heck?
information. GPS data that shows exactly where that car would be." Madison 16.
That's nuts.
The CAD report says exactly who called in, responding, when they were dispatched, when they arrived, when they cleared. Right. Madison 10 is Benfield,
Mhm.
and he called the call at 9:45. So when he was behind the van, he was dispatched, arrived, or dispatched en route and arrived all at 9:45 and 23 seconds.
Yeah.
right? Then there was Doss, Madison 16, said he was responding, but he never arrives. The CAD report never has him arriving. It actually has him
Actually-
canceled from the call.
Yep.
And then you have Matthew Michael saying that he's en route a couple minutes later. Like, so he's dispatched en route, and then he arrives a few minutes after that. And then you have a different CAD report that shows the Maiden guys. Again, 3 Maiden guys said they were responding. 1 of them got canceled. 2 of them arrived. So the CAD report actually reflects exactly what the videos all verify.
Mhm.
That there were 2 Maiden guys and 2 Madison guys.
Mhm.
No Madison 16, which is DOS. No DOS arrived. Canceled. Right? They have no tangible evidence, nothing that shows that DOS was on scene. Yet they allowed his testimony in district court saying that he was there. Not that it mattered, because he testified he didn't see a crime.
Right.
Right?
Right.
They're just trying to bolster the argument that if we put 2 cops on the stand, maybe it's twice as believable. Like, no, because they're both crooked. They're both liars. They both violate rights.
Yep.
Like, so again, this is public record. You can pull up the CAD, do your own request for Madison. You do the Rockingham County like 911 center for February 21st, 2020, between the hours of 9:45 and 10:45. Get the CAD report for the call from the Madison Methodist Church, and you'll be able to see it. Like, he was never there, right? He's not mentioned in the police report. He's not mentioned in the arrest report, the incident report, but he's on the witness list, right? So anyway, that's a major problem, right? Like he's not there. But then I tell the prosecutor this. I'm like, hey man, none of the evidence shows that he's there. And he's like, oh yeah, he was there. I'm like, no, I'm telling you, I went down through the stuff that I just told you with him. And then I said, hey, when he was playing all these videos and things, he played Benfield's body camera. And remember, I told you earlier that on the video that we made, you can hear where Benfield climbs in the van. And I say, hey man, we don't consent to search and seizures. You need to get out of my van. And he goes, how do you know I'm in your van if you're blind? And we talked about, well, of course you can feel somebody crawl in your car. You can hear them. You can smell them, right? That audio is conveniently missing from Benfield's body camera. It's not there. The prosecutor played it. I'm like, hey, where's this dialogue? And I recap the dialogue. And he's like, what? I'm like, back it up. After he pulls the driver out, pick it up again. So he plays it, and it goes to where they get me out. I'm like, okay, this audio is missing. Play it again. So he backs it up. He plays it a couple times. It's missing. I'm like, all right, cool. We play all the way through and hear that. And then I'm like, he's got the video supposedly that he claims that I posted to YouTube, which I couldn't have because I was in jail. She posted to YouTube because she's the editor and she's the owner of this channel. This is her channel. I'm just the lead anchor and the investigative reporter, right? So he plays that video and the audio is there. The audio of that dialogue of him climbing through onto the seat is there. I'm like, look, you just listened to this, man. Like, so clearly the body camera that you have has been tampered with. It's been altered. And he's like, oh no, this has been altered. But you just heard it. You heard it yourself. So you're still going to try to use this tampered evidence? Like when you know it's been tampered with? And he's like, oh, it hasn't been tampered with. Like, well, then where's that conversation? Clearly, one of these isn't like the other. One of these has it, and one of these doesn't have it. And it's the body camera from Benfield that's missing. I'm like, okay, well, let's play Michael's body camera of the stop and see if it's there. And he's like, I don't have Michael's body camera of the stop. I'm like, what? You don't have the only other officers from Madison that we can confirm was on scene? You don't have his body camera from the stop at all? That's going to have a third angle?
That's so crazy. How do you...
Right? Showing this crazy terrorist Benfield doing his thing? You don't have that body camera? Nope, he doesn't have the body camera. Okay. Well, what about the body camera of Matthew Michael and the conversation I had at the police department? Where Matthew Michael admits, oh yeah, we've been tracking you. Our chief or our captain, Jason White's been tracking you and your activism in Guilford County. Where's that body camera? Where's that conversation? Do you have that? No, he doesn't have that. He has like a 10-minute video of Benfield's body camera at the police department, and it cuts off. It doesn't have the whole hour at that police department. Where's the other like 40 minutes? So there's got 40 minutes of body camera missing from there. That's exculpatory evidence. And then there's body camera missing from the magistrate's office where they're having this ex parte communication. Again, you have a little bit of Matthew Michael's body camera, but then it stops. It doesn't have Benfield trying to conspire with Jimmy Carter, the magistrate, to figure out what they can charge me with. It doesn't show them locking me in a cell some 40 feet away so that I couldn't hear the conspiring that was happening at the magistrate's office. Where's that body camera? Like, why does it stop right here? It doesn't show the rest of it. And I informed the prosecutor, you have all these problems with your evidence. Your evidence is tainted, it's altered, it's tampered with, and they intentionally omitted the parts that are criminal. Well, they included a lot of the criminal stuff where Benfield's whole stop was criminal, but they specific other elements of extra criminal activity, right? That he was doing. Because him climbing in the car is him performing a search. He has no right to climb in that car unless I was being a threat and he had to try to get me from the other side, which I wasn't. I was simply saying I need a disability coordinator. Right? So that's deleted. The conversation of where they admit that this could have been a retaliatory stop because they were tracking my activism is deleted. The third angle of the body camera of the stop, the whole thing is gone, deleted. The video of the magistrate's office where he's having the ex parte communication, deleted. And I informed the prosecutor, you don't have all this stuff, man. Like, where is this? And he's like, oh, this is all I was given. I'm like, okay, now you know that this exists. So if you don't get it, you have a duty to find this exculpatory information and then to do the right thing. So a prosecutor's job isn't just to get to convictions. Like, his job is to uphold justice. His job is to weigh evidence and say, okay, is this a case worth prosecuting? Is there a justice element to the public, to society, to prosecute this case? Does this person deserve to be prosecuted for this? Is there probable cause? Is there evidence? Is there exculpatory evidence? If there's exculpatory evidence and it shows that this person didn't do it, then you shouldn't prosecute, right? But again, this is the same guy that was supposed to prosecute the guy that attacked me, Gould, and took my sign, and I was the victim, and he never contacted me. And I reached out to the office saying, hey, I need to know when this is going to be so I can be there to testify, so I can bring evidence. And they intentionally did not contact me. So there's all kinds of prosecutorial misconduct from Matthew Cockman and the Rockingham County Prosecutor's Office. Right? So again, this is I'm putting this out there for you guys to know because she wanted to share with you guys on this channel. I'm letting you know that these lawsuits are coming. The state of North Carolina is about to get sued with a huge lawsuit, multiple lawsuits, right? All right, so going back, afternoon, after 4 p.m., judge is calling his own witnesses. He calls the chief of police out of nowhere. He manifests, pew, and then testifies. But then I ask him, hey, did you guys provide a visual interpreter when I went to review the body camera stuff? It's like, no. Okay. Did anybody take notes? No. Okay, cool. Good. Glad we got that record. I should have asked, why are you here today? Who called you in?
Yeah.
But I wasn't thinking that I don't function at my best surrounded by tyrants where they kick out any people that are supporting me and have tried to encourage me to exercise rights, where I'm there under the threat of violence. Like, again, PTSD, right? Where these are the same people that have already kidnapped me. Multiple of the guys in the room or the guys that have kidnapped me are trying to throw me in jail and would like to see me dead. They've been party to the death threats against me and my family. They witnessed them themselves firsthand and did nothing, right? Yeah. So yeah, I'm not at the top of my game, like in that scenario, right? So I should have asked the questions. I should have asked, how did you know to be in the courtroom today? Who told you to be here? But I didn't. But it doesn't take a rocket surgeon to figure out that the judge did something ex parte to get this chief of police in there to testify on the judge's behalf. Because the judge, again, he put on this whole dog and pony show, this whole theatrical show to say, look, I'm protecting myself. I'm trying to don this cloak of absolute immunity because I'm showing that I'm doing everything I can to accommodate the man with disabilities. Like, when in fact, he just kept stepping on his dick for like over an hour, having ex parte communications, calling his own witnesses, questioning his own witnesses, right? Prosecuting from the bench. And then making a record. And then from there, he went on to go down my ADA request line by line in open court, trying to say, look, we made this accommodation. Look, we can't make this accommodation for this and this, right? So again, it's supposed to be administrative, and he did it from the bench, acting as a judge, even though no adjudication has happened from the court. So He was trying to don judicial immunity, but that function wasn't being adjudicated. The prosecution has no say in what accommodations can be made. So there's no other party. It's just an administrative thing. Me saying, no, judge, this is the law. This is what you're supposed to do. This is in my motion to dismiss, that you are violating my rights, that you should have recused yourself. This should have been continued until we could have an accommodation, all accommodations that are agreed upon. And then you should recuse yourself from hearing the motion to dismiss because it's based on you being one of the chief violators of my rights. But he didn't do that. So after all the dog and pony show, nearly 5 p.m., he finally goes, okay, now let's get to the pretrial motions. Finally, we get to the adjudication of the case, nearly 5 p.m. And he goes, what motions do you have? I'm like, I got a motion to dismiss. Like I mentioned earlier, it's due process rights violations. This should be handled front and center. And okay, well, I've read the motion. Do you have anything else to add? I'm like, yeah. And I brought up the stuff from that day. Like, you violated the ADA today by putting on this dog and pony show, by threatening me, by using coercion, threats, and intimidation to take off a blindfold, by threatening my auxiliary aide to force him to be my interpreter, like by forcing me into the courtroom and to accept a level of accommodation that I refused to accept, 42 U.S.C. 12201. And I gave, I cited line and verse to him. And he's like, okay, is that it? And, made all the arguments that I covered with you guys. And he goes, okay, yeah, this is without merit and it's denied. So he denied the motion to dismiss, just outright. And he's like, you got any other motions? I'm like, yeah, I got a motion to sequester the witnesses. And it's like, prosecution, you have any problem with that? It's like, no, as long as the defense witnesses get sequestered too. And I'm like, that's fine. And he said what witnesses he had. He said he's going to call Doss and Benfield and Michael, and then Kyle Ray, the civilian that supposedly waved down the cop. And they asked if I had any witnesses. I said, no, I'll probably take the stand, but the witnesses that he just called, I'll probably, I may have to call them too. So nothing more than that. He's like, all right, any other motions? I'm like, yeah, there's a motion to suppress. And he's like, yeah, I've reviewed that, and it's a substantial motion. So it actually sounds like the way he said it, like it's got teeth, because it does. Like the prosecution has no case. And my motion suppressed lays out how he absolutely has no case. They had no RAS to turn on the lights at the beginning. They had no RAS once he walked up to the window and he realized, oh, it's just two people sitting here. There's no crime. At that point, even if the judge wanted to say he had RAS to turn on his lights, he definitely doesn't have it at that point. He has no reason to continue the investigation. But you can go further than that. In North Carolina, there is no failure to ID statute. There is a surrender of license statute, which says that a cop can ask for a person that's in control of a motor vehicle to surrender their license. And the verbiages of that says to present, just like in other states, that you don't have to physically give it over. You just have to exhibit it, right? And that's what Mrs. Justice did that night. She held it up to the window, and he threatened to smash the window again. So she slid it up, and he grabbed it out of the window. So that's the only statute in North Carolina that talks about ID. There is no failure to ID statute in North Carolina. Thank you. What they do is they charge you with resist, delay, obstruct if you don't give ID to an officer. And there's all kinds of cases on that. There's one state v. Ellis, one state v. Friend. And the cases where they charge people with resist, delay, obstruct because they didn't give ID to a law enforcement officer in North Carolina, the courts actually say, it's either in Friend or Ellis, the courts, the appellate courts, they say, we haven't addressed this question. And they don't, and we're not addressing it here, right? So you have to interpret from the rulings, what the standard is, what the minimum standard is for law enforcement to be able to force somebody to give ID in North Carolina. And here's the standard. What the courts have said is, because resist, delay, obstruct charge is resisting a public officer in the performance of their duty. It's like when the person knows that the person's a public officer and they willfully violate that. They do it knowingly. They willfully, and I can explain that in a minute. But so that's basically it. So what is the duty of the officer that's requiring the person to give identification? That's the question you have to ask. And the way that these court cases, all the court cases on this, say that when they have upheld the resist, delay, obstruct charge, it's because the cop already had a duty to get their ID. They were already trying to write a ticket or a summons or an arrest, enact an arrest for somebody because they had enough evidence they already gathered to meet the level of probable cause. Because you can't write, as a cop, you can't write a ticket or summons or arrest somebody just with reasonable suspicion. You have to have the threshold of probable cause, right? That's the Fourth Amendment, right? So it's a higher level of evidence that you have to have gathered to say, oh yeah, I know for sure that there's a crime because of this all this evidence I've got. I've met the probable cause threshold. And they have to have that in order to write a summons or a ticket. And so a summons or a ticket is like, hey, I need to give this to you. And then I also give a copy to the court. And the court needs to know who they're expecting to come in to face this charge. So I need your name to put on the summons or the ticket. That logically makes sense, right? And so if you don't have that, right? If you don't have probable cause, then there's no need for a name because there's no ticket. Benfield wasn't trying to ticket us for anything. He wasn't trying to give us a summons for anything. He was fishing for warrants. He said, I need to run you for warrants. You pick a warrant for murder, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the standard in North Carolina is a cop has to have probable cause unless there's specific circumstances, right? If there's an escaped convict and they already know the person's name and their description because they can pull them up. They see their picture ID and they're looking for John Smith and you happen to look just like John Smith. So, hey, I need to see your ID to make sure you're not John Smith. Okay. That's what they just have RAS. Just because you look like John Smith, I have a picture of him right here. Then they can say, give me your ID, right? Or if they're out and they have somebody that has warrants for them and they pull up John Smith's picture ID, they know what he looks like. They know his name already. And they're looking for John Smith because they already know he's got warrants out. And they're going to his last known location and they're looking for him and like, oh man, there's a guy around this area. Hey, you look just like John Smith. Let me see your ID. Right? Then that's RAS. They already have RAS that you're a wanted guy because I already have your picture. You look just like the guy. Let me confirm or deny that. Right? Outside of that, right? The other option outside of probable cause is extremely rare where there's a crime committed and a witness sees that person commit a crime and they know the person's name, date of birth, and can give physical description and like, which direction they traveled and like if they went in a car or whatever, what they're wearing. So they give that information to the cops and the cops can pull up that person in the system based on the information. Say, okay, now I have a picture ID. I've got your name and you're accused of doing this crime. And then they go in the direction that they were told to look for this guy because that's where they fled off to. And if you happen to match the description of that, then that's that minimum standard of RAS. Okay, well, you match the description of a guy that just did this crime because we have his ID and his name. I need to check your ID to see if it matches. That's the minimum standard for RAS. Without those special circumstances that are rare, then the minimum standard in North Carolina is probable cause. That's what the case law is saying, right? The courts don't say that in that language, but you have to understand. They said they could only get it. RDO sticks only if the cops had a duty to get the ID because they were writing a ticket. They can't write a ticket without probable cause. They can't write a ticket with just reasonable suspicion. So there you go. So the motion to suppress, we didn't argue that, but he did say it was substantial. And he's like, we'll do it the next day. We'll do it Tuesday morning at 9:30. He's like, is there anything else? I'm like, yeah, there's a motion to continue that the prosecution made. Is that withdrawn? And he's like, no, we're not withdrawing. I'm just going to deny it. We're already here. You're going to be here tomorrow. So
now,
again,
remember why he was trying to continue because he was sick.
The prosecutor, Matthew Cockman, put in a motion to continue because he tested positive for the coof and he was symptomatic. You can hear him on the audio. He was coughing. He sounded ill. And the judge ordered him in there. He ordered me in there. He ordered us to go into a room together to review up to 3 hours of video. Right? So later that night, we get out of court. Later that night, after my auxiliary aide drops me off, he drives his other extra hour home, and then he tests himself, and he says, hey, I tested positive for the coof. I can't make it. I feel like shit. I'm like, okay. So he texted me a picture, and then we put it in an email for the judge and the prosecutor, but I had to still be there in the morning, right? Because if I wasn't going to show up,
Oh my God.
they were going to send out goons to go hunt me down, right? So I had to scramble to get a ride. And
This was a nightmare.
a friend came through and gave me a ride, knowing the situation that I'd been around somebody who just tested positive, right? He still gave me a ride anyway. And their guidelines for Rockingham County was if you're near somebody, if you'd been around somebody that tested positive, you can't come in. Like you're denied access to the courthouse, right? And you have to either test negative and wait 5 days after the negative test, or be asymptomatic for at least 5 days, right? That's their standard to get access to the courthouse. So I go in the morning, and the court security, like I go before 9 a.m. The court security guy is like, "Hey, has anybody been near anyone that has tested positive?" And I said, "Yes, I have. The guy that I was here yesterday with, like you've been near him, and the prosecutor, not just me.
So
That's just my friend that came with me, but the prosecutor like tested positive, and he's probably still in here. Like so yes, I have, and most of the staff in here has been around somebody that's tested positive." And he goes, "Oh, okay. Well, you need to wait outside." I'm like, "All right. Well, you need to let the judge know that I'm here waiting. That you were forcing me to wait outside." And he's like, "Yeah, we'll let them know." And so I go outside and I wait. And this is sub 40-degree weather on the 25th of January. So I'm waiting outside the courthouse. We shoot the email before 9 a.m. to the judge, to Barbara Reb, his trial court coordinator, and the disability access coordinator, and to the prosecutor, and say, "Hey, here's the situation. I'm trying to get access. My auxiliary aide tested positive last night. Attached is the picture of his positive test." And then they don't respond, right? Eventually a deputy comes out, Gibbs again, and he's like, "Will you take a test? The judge wants to know if you'll take a test." And I'm like, "No, I'm not going to submit to a medical exam so I can get access to the court." And he goes, "Okay, will you tell us your vaccination status?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not going to give up private medical information so I can get access to the court."
Like, you have someone in the court right now?
And then he goes, so then he goes away. And then he's like, "But I think I offered to show him like the thing, the picture." He's like, "No, it's okay. I don't want to see it." So then he goes away. He comes back later. And he has Bolins with him. So those are both two guys that are named in the lawsuit because they were both two guys that kidnapped me for trying to get access to the courts previously.
I just want to remind you guys, back on October 6th, the first time that Mike was arrested on the steps of the courthouse, he went to go to court, and they did not let him in the building. They blocked him from entering the building. Remember? Right. And then they said, "Wait out here."
Yeah.
And so now this is happening again.
Yeah.
This is happening again. We're reliving the same situation where they blocked him from entering the same courthouse, the same door,
for the same
people, for the same case.
Yeah.
And they're saying, "Wait out here." Are you kidding me?
Yeah. So I was expecting to be, kidnapped again at any point.
And regardless of your auxiliary aide's status, you still would have had to answer, "Yes, I've been around someone who was positive
because of the prosecutor.
Right. That you were forced into close whatever.
Right. Because he was positive and symptomatic.
Right.
Right. So it was after 11 a.m., sometime like probably around 11:15, when Gibbs and Bolins finally come back out, and they say, "Hey," because he asked again, when Gibbs and Bolins came out together, they're like, "We just want you to confirm, the judge wants us to ask you again, are you willing to take a test?" And I said, "No." So, "Are you willing to tell us your vaccination status?" I said, "No." And they're like, "Well, can you give us your auxiliary aide's information?" And I go, I'm not at liberty to give his information. I can reach out to him if you want and call him. You know what? I can call him on speaker right now. And I should have continued to record like at least audio, but I asked him like, "Hey, is somebody running a body camera?" And Bolden's like, "Yeah, I am." I'm like, "Okay, well, not that I'll be able to get it, but like, all right, I'll call my auxiliary aide on speaker, and then you can ask him yourself. I'll tell him what's going on. You can ask him yourself." So I did that, but the reason why they asked me again if I was willing to take it was because they had a body camera, because I guess Gibbs probably wasn't running one, but because since he brought Bolins out with him with the body camera, they wanted to have video evidence of me saying, "No, I wouldn't take it," which is just me standing on my rights. Like, okay, cool. You have video evidence of me standing on my rights.
But they don't like that there.
Good for you. Like, right. So then I was like, I offered extra cooperation. Like, I can call this guy right now on speaker and see if he was willing to give you his information for you to verify. Like, you should already have his test because I emailed it to them. You have that, right? He's like, "No, we don't have that." Like, "Oh, well, that's, I don't know why. It was sent before 9 a.m. I can resend it really quick." But yeah, like I said on speaker, I asked him like, "Hey man, these guys are here. They're asking me these questions. They want your information. It's totally up to you if you want to give it to them or not." And he's like, "Okay, yeah." And he gave him his name, his phone number, his home address. And they're like, "All right, cool. Thanks, man." And then and that was it. So I was like, all right, I could show you his test right here. I got it on my phone. And they're like, no, we don't want to see it. I'm like, all right, well, I'll resend it to the prosecutor and the judge again because it should have went through this morning, and it shows that it was sent this morning. So we did it again. Like as soon as they walked off, I had it resent, and it, and they said, please confirm it this time. And then they finally said, oh yeah, we got it, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
But then eventually around 11:15, they come out. So I've been outside. They left me outside in sub 40-degree weather for over 2 hours when I'm trying to get access to the courts and trying to follow their silly protocols. Even if they wanted me to take a test and it showed negative, their protocol says I still need to wait 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
I still need to wait 5 days. So there's no reason to take a test. Like I'm not going to have some monkey do a test for me when you guys can't do anything right. You can't even do your jobs of law enforcement right. So why would I expect you to be able to do anything medical right? So
Yeah.
They came out and they said, well, since Gibbs and Boland's like, since the first they're like, you recording? I think you guys have probably seen this on it might have been on this channel, but I think it's definitely on Eric's channel. It's like, is this being recorded? I'm like, I hope so. I can never verify because I can't see if it's actually has the recording going or not until later. So I'm like, I think so, I hope so. But then he's like, the judge said that Judge Albright is saying that because you're not cooperating with the courts, we're going to continue the case. And I go, what do you mean by not cooperating with the courts? And he goes, well, because you refuse to take the medical test and tell us your vaccination status. I'm like, okay, because I'm standing on my rights. The judge is saying that's not cooperating with the courts. Got it. Thanks.
Yeah, and this is in Rockingham County Courthouse. This judge was Judge Albright.
Judge Albright, Superior Court judge. Yeah.
Superior Court judge.
Yeah. And so then that was basically it. I had him recap it, like break it down, like who exactly is saying this. And then, he names Judge Albright. And then he said, but he also said this, that, you can't be recording anything during this whole trial. And I'm like, no, that's not what he said. And we're not in trial, dude. We're on the sidewalk. We're 3 dudes on a public sidewalk. So they said that I have to hear back from the prosecutor to find out when the case would be continued to. And since then, I have filed a motion of appeal. So I've appealed this court order or his denial of my motion to dismiss. I've appealed that to the North Carolina Court of Appeals. So we're going to go ahead and jump out of Superior Court to the Court of Appeals and saying, hey, look, this is the craziness that this insane judge is doing at the Superior Court level. This is how he's violating rights. He didn't recuse himself. He did all this dog and pony show stuff for over an hour that was trying to embarrass and discriminate and belittle the person with disabilities. All this stuff that should have been done administratively, he was doing in open court to try to, demean me for the morning session and the afternoon session. So that's where we're at with that. We're waiting on some things to finish that up. We might try and get the transcript for that Monday stuff. But the court reporter quoted like $1,300 to get a transcript. So that's
insane.
Yeah, that's an insane amount of money that they're trying to get, which is just another barrier to the courts, right? It's another financial barrier, and it's even discriminatory because I can't pay that. I don't have income, so
People, that's insane. Insane.
So there you go. Now you're up to date. We're going on the offensive, and we are suing all these perpetrators and the state of North Carolina in federal court. So that is what is happening. So you guys are in the know. Once we file the suits, then we'll share them with you. But
Yeah.
Until then, that's what's up.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for stopping by. Anybody got any questions or whatever we can answer really quick? We can do that. What time is it?
We're at 3.5 hours. 5:20.
Okay.
I'll hang out for a second. See if I have typing. Let's see here. Woo! Hold on, you guys just got going fast. This is Noli. Love you guys so much. Love you, Noli.
Hey, Noli.
And all around picks asses pork. Thanks for the update. Steven says thanks. Roland, thanks for the update. Chronic Wanderer, big mess. Prayers, y'all. Let's see. It's corrupt all the way to the top. Remember? Trump said.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Happy Quails, thank you. That was an excellent explanation. Douglas says never ever settle. Oh, I lost it. There are more words, but Noli. How did you two say so damn gorgeous at Fine Justice? Oh, Noli. It's been so dark. New Zealand.
Hey, what's up?
Steve Boyd. I followed your channel for a while now. From what I've seen, you've been treated, oh man, appallingly. Thank you for the update. Best of luck. Somebody's first from Puerto Rico question: what can be done so cops don't mute their body worn cameras? Wear your own.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Wear your own body camera.
Yeah. And that doesn't stop them from muting that or chucking it across the yard, but
right.
It's something.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And it's state by state, their rules on it. Like North Carolina is just so screwed up. Like they have their public records is so messed up. You can't get access to their body cam and stuff unless you're in it. And then you have to like schedule a time. And then like in this case where they have all this deleted footage and altered footage, like you're screwed, right? Because at this point, like it's so late in the game. You can sue them.
Yeah.
You know? That's really the option you have is to sue them.
Yeah. All right. Happy Quails. I wanted to warn him against representing himself, but then I realized if anyone can do it, he can. Thanks, Happy Quails.
Appreciate it. Well, I mean, if my accommodations are made, I'm in a much better position to be able to do it. But if it's not made, and I'm in a place where they're just continuing to threaten and coerce and intimidate, and they're not making accommodations, like, then yeah, definitely not at the top of my game. So
yeah. There must be something in the water in North Carolina. There must be.
All right. Well, there weren't any questions, so thank you guys for tuning in.
Yeah.
Now you know what's going on. If you want to redress grievances, you can do that at any level of government you want. If you want to file ADA complaints at the federal level, the Department of Justice, you can do that. You don't have to be the person with the disability that's being discriminated against. You just have to have knowledge of it. And you can reference this video. You can reference any of the videos that are on this channel or other channels that have covered this ongoing harassment, discrimination, and just blatant abuses. And yeah, any form that you want to do. If you want to call the Attorney General's office of the state, if you want to call the judicial review boards, like whatever you want to do.
Yeah. Somebody was mentioning that earlier.
Just do it peacefully.
Please. Yes. Peacefully.
Thank you.
Love you guys.
Yep. And Deo Presto Liber.